Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final episode of the year. It's the Christmas special here at 2.5 Talent. One more episode, of course. Just to summarize everything before we get into the player break. We've had a few things to talk about. Of course, in our post-major episode, we're going to have one really big tournament since then, being at a blast, where we'll kickstart things momentarily. Before we get into all the everything, lads, how we doing? How we all doing?
Good.
I'm okay.
Good.
Good.
Yeah,
So-
we're chilling.
We're
I
chilling.
had the opportunity to do some of the end of ECL and then some ECL relegation as well. And at one point there was a game that I had to do, which was literally between two Eastern Russian open teams
I did see
in
it,
relegation,
actually.
but I was paid for it, so all good.
Annie, what have you been up to?
I finished up ECL, put out a couple of videos, and it's been just really relaxing. I mean, I had to watch the replays of all the World Finals because Jesus, it was
The
like
times.
3, 4 a.m. It was ridiculous.
6 a.m.
So,
for
I
UK,
mean,
yeah.
I know. So after that's over, I mean, now it's just kind of like look forward to next year, chill out, enjoy December, and yeah.
Love to see it. I mean, for me, I had a bit of casting since then. I've done ECL, obviously, like everybody else. I did playoffs, so I did both Asia and Europe, so it was pretty busy. I did the entire playoffs, every single game on the A stream for both Asia and Europe, which is pretty packed. So I did 2 best of 3s. So I in 6 days, I did 10 best of 3s and 2 best of 5s. So pretty fucking packed schedule. And to do all of that with like basically COVID or the flu or whatever, I refused to get tested. So it was either COVID or some
'Cause you're on
pretty
your own
harsh flu.
anywhere, right?
Exactly.
You're
I
on
live
your
on my
own
own.
anyway, yeah.
And I'm a fucking hermit when it comes to most of the things. I've been working all day, so I was like, I can go outside anyway. But yeah, that was a challenge, but no one can fucking question my dedication now. How about that? I worked through death itself. But yeah, that's been pretty busy. But apart from that, it's been pretty good. And now, of course, player break, Christmas break, so we can do our little summaries. Of course, we've had Blast since, so we can kickstart things talking about Blast and how things all went. Of course, we already kind of delved into it a little bit. Timings, fucking brutal. I don't think they even thought about that until it actually happened. I mean, their viewership took a massive tank. I remember I would wake up at like 9 a.m, get ready for the Asia game, which is like, our call time would be at 11, and we start at 12. But I always like to be up 2 hours before my call time, just so my voice is awake, and my brain's awake, because I feel like foggy in the morning. So, yeah, I was up at 9. It was already like a game finished at that point, a second one starting, viewership's like 40k. It really took a hit, right? It definitely wasn't, I don't think, planned perfectly, but it looked pretty good.
To me, this event could mean so much to like World Counter-Strike. It's like the way you qualify is really nice. I mean, bar the obviously the OG thing. Luckily, they managed to put up a good result. But
Yeah.
regardless, like I think the qualification system is really nice to prioritize the biggest events of the year and whatnot. But I feel as though every time we get to the World Finals every year, it always feels like an afterthought rather than like the
I agree.
forefront. You know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the placement of it, maybe just because it's after the major, or if it's in that pocket where a lot of these teams are kind of like, oh, this is going to be our last event with said roster. We're going to make a move after, and you're kind of like, okay, well, I want to see all these rosters after and what they look like once they're post roster move, not
Yeah.
whatever this dead team is right now. And so we have to kind of go through that whole event expecting one thing and getting another, and you could see that even last year was one thing and this year is a very similar situation. And so like I'm kind of like so on whether or not like I actually like back the wins from certain teams and the losses from certain teams, because I don't even know if this is all of these teams at their full powers, you know what I mean?
Agreed.
Yeah,
Travis
and it's
thoughts.
weird, right? Because you look at how the event actually went, and the 3 teams that technically had the most to prove, G2, Liquid, OG, kind of did the best in the entire event, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the best opportunity for G2 and Liquid to actually win something this year, it turns out, looked like it might be this event, and it was. Na'Vi are experimenting. Heroic have Config, which, while he played well, it's no Stown. And yeah, I think it really told the tale of the event. I was actually really happy that final came through, because I do believe, I had a personal belief in my own, my own thoughts, that G2 and Liquid deserve to get something out of this year. So yeah, I'm happy for them for sure. And especially G2, considering Hooksy, of course, had news about his dad passing away before the event too. So, I really think that he deserved it, not just because of that, but because his calls in addition, were absolutely superb. And I think it was a good ending to the year in general to have another team win something.
Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the biggest storylines in it, Hooksy as well. What, a day or two before the event started. I think he was actually in Abu Dhabi when he found out, and obviously his dad passed away. It's horrible news to find out, regardless. But then to do it, the day before a tournament starts, credit to him, man. That's fucking difficult. Like we've kind of this year we've had a couple of different storylines similar to that, where it's like for example, Simple, his family being in Ukraine. That's always been quite a common storyline of him, of like how he's doing mentally speaking. And credit to Hooksy. I take a lot. And that interview as well at the end was really nice. Banks, having a moment with him on the stage and just like all of it kind of coming together. It was very nice. But I think you're right, Marlon. I think for me, this event as a whole feels like an afterthought. It feels like this kind of, oh well, now we're done with the major, we can kind of just try things, see what happens, and whatever happens kind of thing. And you kind of saw that with Na'Vi, for example, bringing a Nipple, which now we all know was a fucking terrible idea. Funnily enough, we all said it. He's not good enough. Who would have thunk it? I mean, not everyone's Manesi or Torzi coming out the We Play Academy League. And to be perfectly honest, if you're a Na'Vi and you're looking as well at those players, Head Trick was their best option, but role-wise, obviously, didn't really make sense there. But yeah, obviously, Nipple comes in, plays terribly. I think one of the maps he got 5 kills and 21 deaths. And you kind of got to feel on the other side for Sunday Young as well. This guy is kind of being forced out of the team. And they're bringing in people to just, in his face, trial them, test them, see if they're good enough to take his place. They're fucking terrible. And he must be like, what am I doing wrong? Come on. At least I'm stable to a degree. Like, at least I'm putting up, like, I may go negative, but it's like a 0.94 rate. It's not that bad. But then you got this kid going 0.2, and you're thinking, Jesus, like, I actually kind of feel for Sunday Young. Well, I don't think he should be in the team. I don't think he's good enough, in my opinion. I kind of feel for him in the sense that, like, this guy's come in, it's just terrible, and he has to watch him. There's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah, I feel so weird about Navi at the moment. It doesn't feel like they've got a good plan going forward. It feels very much like, let's see what happens. And I think they did an interview with Blade after they dropped out, and they were like, yeah, we're still going to play him in 2023, which is a very bold call, to say the least.
Why?
And I think he mentioned, he's like, oh, we know who are free agents in the market right now, and we know who's available, and we've made the decision after looking into the market. It's kind of like his litmus test. He's like, I really don't understand why people think like that we're stupid or something, that we haven't made our decision properly, but this is the decision we're going to make. Which is, I mean, it's bold to say from Blade. I mean, he's made a lot of really good decisions over time. And I mean, it made sense with Bit to kind of stand him into specific maps and slowly merge him into Navi over Flamey. But it's a very different case with Nipple, when you've got a player that was very inconsistent in the We Play Academy League alone. And as you're saying, Neo, like, a lot of the times it's a great litmus test. If you see they're really punching above their weight consistently, that's when you can make a suggestion to the main roster that this makes sense. I mean, you saw that with all of the individuals that you're mentioning.
Yeah, Miles Boys, Manesi, you can see it, all of them. It's very clear as day that they are just leagues better than everybody else.
But you see with Nipple, right? He's very inconsistent within the Academy League. You have ratings where he's getting like above 2, and there's some where he's getting above like 1.0, which is like abhorrent if you want to talk about consistency levels, because if you move him up to a LAN, I mean, first of all, this is his first ever LAN ever, like not even in the tier 2, tier 3 spaces.
Period.
So that alone is such a huge risk to take, and that too into the world final stage against the world's best teams in the world. So like, I mean, I think that overall, I'm still very low on this. I mean, I trust Blade to make the right decision, but overall, it's going to take a lot more molding in comparison to a player like Bit, who fundamentally understood the game just a little bit better than Flamey did.
I agree.
What I will say is that I do think Bit has had a minor buff since the A1S nerf, because he's an A4 gamer, and now he's no longer getting body shot by 4 A1S bullets every single time he turns a corner and tries to entry, right? So I think that is a good sign for Navi going into next year. But as you say, figuring out who they're going to play with. I mean, there are lots of options if we look at CIS, but if you look at Ukraine, maybe it's a bit limited, right? And there's still a question mark at the moment with Na'Vi over the status of Electronic, right? I mean, Perfecto has purposely gone out of his way to contact Liquipedia and say, okay, we have decided to use a neutral flag for next year. And that sort of indicates that Perfecto is going to stick with Na'Vi. But Electronic, one, his contract is up, and two, he is yet to contact Liquipedia about the flag thing. And again, I mean, Jeff from Liquipedia, we saw the tweets, like he made a good point to say, do not read into this when it doesn't need to be read into.
Agreed,
but the contract ending bit is the bit you need to read into because there's been nothing about Electronic, no news yet at all. So how that resolves itself is yet to be seen.
And normally you hear about extensions way before the contract's up, right? I mean, like, well, for some fucking reason, Zipnex, for example, 2027, this guy was confirmed like 2 years before his contract is even done. And now he's locked in until he's going to be an AOP. So, you normally hear way early. So that was the only thing for me is I thinking, right, if they then lose... Well, okay, Sunday Yoga, it kind of seems like a surefire at this point that he's going. I did see a couple of people making pretty, some Hail Mary throws out there of attempts of who would come in. Inters was one that was thrown out, of course, the whole thing going out with C9. But I just think generally for Na'Vi, they want to stay away from Russia for the most part. And completely fucking understandable why with kind of the whole geopolitical situation. It's hard to find people who will... agree to, uproot their life from Russia, move to another country, don't identify as Russian anymore, or at least in a kind of more public sense. That it's not too common. That's probably the better way to put it. So I feel like it's slightly unlikely. But like you mentioned, the pool in Ukraine isn't exactly that big. There's not exactly there's not too many players who can step up and just straight into a tier 1 team. I mean, there basically isn't even another tier 1 Ukrainian... Well, there is another tier 1 Ukrainian team, and there's barely another tier 2. I mean, Bait is probably the next best example of
Ickler and Bait.
Yeah, and to be fair to Ickler, they've been doing all right, but they're so inconsistent. So I don't know about them. Bait obviously had a fairly okay performance to close RMR. I know they beat Fnatic. I cast that game. That was actually fucking amazing on Ancient. And I've always been a massive Captain Kirker fan, and I think he's a really good player. Is he able to step up to tier 1? In my opinion, no, not yet. Definitely better than bloody Nipple, but is he able to step up? Generally speaking, I don't really think so. So yeah, they're in a really horrible position. Hobbit was one of the favorites as well to go over. I think that should be a great signing. Does it happen? Who knows? But basically, they're in a horrible position. Blade obviously seems to know what he's on about. He seems to know what he's talking about. But I think also there's a case in point where when you're feeling very unconfident, you put on the bravado and act confident and hope you can kind of just buy some time until you can make decisions, or buy some time until things, pan out. So who knows? But Na'Vi are in a really rough predicament, especially if Electronic goes as well. That makes it even worse. Then you just lose, well, technically your IGL and then the bulkier firepower. And I mean, for me, if I'm Na'Vi, I'd be looking at getting in another IGL, and then if you keep Electronic, bring in an IGL and then put Electronic back to rifling is one way, because I think I need to look a little bit more comfortable at that. But basically, it's a shit show.
Yeah, I think that overall, I don't think Electronic's going to go, just because I feel as though Blade has been super adamant about Electronic continuing the IGL. That's another thing that he mentioned in a lot of these interviews, where he's hell-bent on making it work, and he was the proponent on like pushing for it initially as well, alongside Electronic. So I don't know. I just feel like Electronic is now synonymous with the words Na'Vi. Like,
I agree.
It doesn't feel like a player that you would be willing to move. If anything, you'd move him back to a rifling role and you'd put in an IGL.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, at this point, I think that they're going to need a couple of more bad events. They're saying that they're going under a rebuild phase. I think they just need a cold splash of water in their face, i.e. like a bombing out of Kato or just bombing out of the blast groups or something like that. And I think that will be the catalyst for something major to happen. And until then, they can kind of coast by, because they're still making deep runs. Like, this team is still stacked enough to make deep runs for any team standards. But I mean, obviously, in terms of Na'Vi standards, I don't think it's enough. And eventually, something will give.
What happens? Who knows? I mean, that is gonna be horrible.
I agree.
Another thing that was quite interesting about Blast was the two major finalists bombing out, being the first two to to fall. And I think that really cements to a lot of people who kind of hailed Rio as being one of the weakest and they kind of just generally the shittest major, right? A lot of people, very, very, angry and adamant and very vocal about it. But definitely one of the weakest in terms of what we got towards the end. Hence why, generally speaking, there was, I think that sort of tainted the major as a whole. Or one of the things that did taint the major slightly, which is the fact that the pool towards the end was pretty weak. But for them, that was a field day. Going to Blast, another big tier 1 event straight after the major and see the finalists bomb out. That was an absolute field day for people who were extremely vocal saying of how bad results were. But yeah, I mean, that to me was actually relatively surprising. Outside, it just looked terrible from start to finish. There was just nothing redeeming about them. I don't know if they were burnt out or spent too much time partying or whatever, but I wasn't comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw as well, I actually a little sort. I don't think I actually mentioned this on any podcast, but I think when I saw Outsiders play, I think just a couple of rounds, I just mentioned to myself that okay, I can see them just bobbing out of this from a mile off. To be honest, I think they completed what they wanted to do this year.
Job, yeah.
Like the world final was a bonus, but it's just a little bonus to add on to the end of it, and they're just going to say, yeah, well, there's not really much for us there, but yeah, I think it was pretty obvious. For example, I mean, Outsiders, I wouldn't really put them in the same boat as Heroic. I thought Heroic played it actually relatively okay considering the situations. I thought Outsiders were generally a lot worse, but it just got the impression that they just didn't really give a damn about this one, to be honest. But yeah, I think just going by the teams that were in the event, I've got to say, Outsiders, kind of to be expected, unfortunately. And OG, as I said, one of the 3 teams that wanted to prove something this year and actually win something. I thought they did relatively well, and I was impressed by what I saw. But just thinking about this as a little separate factor, I guess, makes you wonder now, with G2 and OG in particular, I don't think OG were necessarily going to plan to make changes anyway, right?
No, I don't think
but
so.
if G2 bombed out of this event, absolutely they're going to say, okay, well, it's time to replace Hooksy, no matter what the outside situation is. There's no way we can justify it. But now they're in a dilemma of, okay, well, we haven't really won anything through the whole year, yet we've looked absolutely insane. And Hooksy has been such an impactful player and leader into getting us this world final victory for the first tournament victory for G2 since 2017, I think it is Malmo, right? So, like, now they have to say, well, we can't change anything now. Let's just see how the beginning of the year goes.
It's going to be something quite interesting for G2 because I don't feel comfortable about G2 just yet, just in the sense of, I know obviously Blast winning is great, but I think, there was criminal underperformances at Blast, and of course in their case and Liquid's case, overperformances in what was the grand scope of the tournament. So I still don't really feel comfortable because if we then go back, go into 2023, we go to like a Kato or a Pro League, and it's the same story again, G2 come, everyone expecting big things, and they just underperform and bomb out, then are we just delaying the inevitable in a sense? Well, obviously I know it's very sad to see what's going on with Hooksy externally. It's exactly like he's got his position secured in my opinion. I still feel on edge about him, even though I was quite vocal in terms of I like him as an IGL. I like what he did with Copenhagen Flares, I'll say. But yeah, I don't know. I still feel very on edge about G2. I'm not secure, even though of course they've won and congrats to them to winning. It still feels like that even they themselves are like, this isn't. They're not locked in by any means.
Yeah, no. I think that there was definitely a lot of overperformances on G2's part. I mean, you look at JKS, had some insane numbers. Yeah. Hunter
that
as well.
Game.
Yeah, I mean,
Unreal.
Both of those players kind of were on my totem pole of players that are not performing to where they should be. And I was very worried that they wouldn't actually perform and they would be nearing the out of the door realms of conversation. But the thing is that they performed. Hey ho, like, I mean, they did great against the opposition that was in front of them. Great. I mean, the win against FaZe is definitely legit. They definitely outclassed all of their nuke performances were very, very good. Hooksy showed that he could go 1.0, which is like the bare minimum, and that expectation is fantastic. I mean, that he could reach that. So all in all the pieces worked. Yeah, sure, and we made it happen. But I mean, obviously the sample size is always going to be smaller when it comes to a Blast tournament. And as we've seen in prior situations, Blast has always been a litmus test for some teams, but it hasn't been the norm for some teams as well. I mean, you think back to the fall finals, Na'Vi winning it was it spring finals? I think it was where they just, or sorry, no, spring finals was Navi and fall finals was Heroic. But
Cool.
spring finals was Navi, didn't necessarily have that kind of form in terms of contending for titles after that, and that kind of domination never showed up again with SDY. And with the, I mean, obviously this sample size is even smaller with Heroic because they didn't get to play the World Finals with Stound, but Heroic overall hasn't shown that kind of level after beating FaZe as well. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be very trepidatious about G2 in general. Very curious to see how they perform at Kato. But this is kind of like the stage has been set, the bar has been set as to where G2 should be performing. And if they can't meet that bar regularly, I think you should just be casting them aside and say, let's start to make moves again. And I basically need to see replication at this point.
Replication is the most important thing. If they're not making semis at big events and S2 events at plus, then you have to say, okay, then maybe the end of the year was just a end of the year roll down. Everyone else is slowing down. We decided to speed up a little bit and actually get ourselves a victory, you know, flash in the pan sort of thing. As you say, JKS's performances were unbelievable. That was that two little instances on Nuke. Where he had 2 mouse wheel jumps or something in 3 rounds, and the first one, the first one was was a situation where he should have never won that clutch. I think Rain was the one who whiffed that, so that would have probably sent that game to overtime. Yeah, pretty wild. But I think that's a good summary for the world final because for G2's sake, because I think Paladin put it right. As for Liquid, again, I think they're almost in the same boat because I was having a discussion with Jay, Brandon, and Retro about this, right? Yeah. Going into the final, Nitro was the highest rated IGL in the entire event, and Brandon was like, "Get rid of Nitro, cut Nitro," and I'm like, "Well, there's no one really to replace them." And the same logic in my logic goes for OC, because I don't think OC is stepping up. I'm putting OC at the moment in the same collection as Torji on Mouse. They're very good AWPers, but they go missing in big event games. And at the moment, if Liquid and Mouse are going to want to push forward and actually win something, they need an AWPer that they can rely on. And right now, even though I think I actually believe in OC, even maybe a little bit more than Torji, I'm not seeing that. And I'm concerned. Paladin, I'm actually be interested in your thoughts on that. In terms of Liquid, because obviously you're our NA boy. OC's not stepping up. Nitro is okay, but sometimes questionable. What do you do?
Junior.
I think Junior is definitely one of the moves.
It's a move.
It is a move in the grand scheme of things. But I think you're completely right, Trav. I mean, Nitro has been a huge problem, and I think I kind of echo Brandon's sentiment where I would like him gone just because I thought that the fall final was kind of a fluke, just with the overperformance that he had against Navi in particular. That was the one series where I actually looked like he pulled his own weight. The problem is that I think statistically his roles don't feel like they match up with the kind of player he is individually. And what I mean by that is that he plays a lot of middle of the pack roles on T side. He plays a lot of rotator spots on CT side, and he doesn't put up those numbers that you're expecting to when you're being put into those roles. And that is my issue with it. And above that, I don't even necessarily think that he's calling the craziest game. I mean, a lot of it has now been placed on Yekindar, at least in terms of like, I'm going to make this play on this side of the map. I'm going to entry here. I'm going to make this play. And same for, other players on the team. So overall, if you could make a move, I would take out Nitro. But as you're saying, what decision could you possibly replace him with?
I don't think there's really who's an NA IGL or even not even an NA. Who's an English speaking IGL? Like this is the conversation I've had a couple times. Name me IGLs that are just ready and waiting. Alex isn't playing at the moment. He's ill. Who IGLs? I mean, like I think there's a massive abundance of actually solid IGLs, to be perfectly honest. So I think this is a problem that maybe everyone's having. I mean, Na'Vi, they even got to the point where like, fuck it, let's just turn our best, or one of our best, or essentially our best rifler into an IGL and hope this works out and just rely on the blade system. I think this is maybe a bit of a problem for everybody, because if you have to fall back on an IGL, there's 2 ways you go about it. Either because there isn't any, you either go the Na'Vi route and turn someone who's experienced and try and make them IGL, or you go the Game Legion route and bring in a youngster and just fucking hope it works. Thankfully for Game Legion, of course it has, because Shui's a bit of a goat, but like generally speaking, I mean, who's even like top NA IGLs? Pardon, I can't even think.
I
of
mean,
any.
so you think about EG Black right now, Walco having a lot of success now, calling for the squad.
Okay.
I don't think you would go back and pull Stanislaw out of the mud again. Maybe
Yeah.
Stamina, but he just signed down to Nouns. I don't think that he would make the move up. And then EG White with Ben Leet, but I don't think he's necessarily
Hell of
at
a
the
name. Ben
fragging
Lee.
level to move up either. And that's kind of it. Like that's
Yeah.
really all of the players that you could look to. And of all of that, I think Walco is probably your best option. But then again, he's not proven. I don't think it's a huge risk to overhaul a system with a youngster at the helm.
Yeah.
There are egos on this Liquid squad.
Do they respect
and
him,
that-
right?
yeah, and yeah, do they respect him? That is the main proponent of whether or not a player like Yekindar, who's played with Jame and has seen the kind of top tiers of
Yeah.
how to IGL, would he be willing to take that step down? And then the other issue is that I think I was mentioned to Thorin, and he was saying that Nitro and Elige are very, very close, and
Oh, true.
Elige
yeah.
was actually making the decision to potentially move to Valorant when Nitro did onto 100 Thieves. So that's how close their bond is, and to me, that feels like Nitro's irreplaceable. So then, what do you do?
Mhm.
So I think that is when you look towards OC, and you just try to go international. You try to go
You
to
can't
like a
get NA,
Mantu.
right? There's no
Yeah,
NA Olympics.
I think you absolutely go international. Maybe you go to CIS. Maybe you go to Europe as well. But I think NA doesn't have the capacity right now to pick out a good opera, because overall we've just struggled with that role.
Yeah.
As
It's
a
like
region
none, right? It's
for
like
Asia.
none proper. I mean, like Wiz is the young kid that everyone's talking about, but he's
But even
really
then, like,
inconsistent, right?
Yeah, he's definitely gotten his numbers up as of recent. He's definitely gotten more consistent. But again, in the playoffs, he kind of fell off during
He's a
ECL
kid,
NA.
right? He's like young.
And he's very, very young as
Yeah,
well. So
exactly.
it's basically you're basically removing OC with another OC type character
Yeah.
in the sense that like
Yeah.
it is a player that has done it that has earned his stripes in ECL but struggles to make the move back
course.
up to tier 1. So overall, I think they should just get rid of OC, and I think that they should move to an EU player to kind of fill in the gaps, because
here
there are
anyway
a
all the
myriad of
time.
offers. Yeah.
It was most,
Yeah.
at this point with like the post-COVID everything. I mean, like obviously I know in a sense actually is like kind of a bad thing, but there's very very few reasons to be permanent in NA. Like Twist, he's been EU based since essentially, right? And even though he's a Canadian boy, he's happy just to be over here. And I think a lot of people have kind of made those steps. You even see it now for South American teams, they're coming over. Casa Esports are in Europe permanently now. You've seen a lot of teams play over. Same with Asia as well. They just I know Limvision last season or 2 seasons ago, didn't play in Challenger League because there was boot camping and they knew it was more important just to play in Europe. Tyloo, I haven't been in Challenger League for like 3 seasons now because they just think it's more important. I mean, I thought that's what's going on with Tyloo, but generally speaking, they haven't gone home. I think generally, go Europe and they can stay here. It would be easier to go to most events anyway, for the most part, right? So I think they're gonna have a much easier time finding an AWPA essentially in Europe than they are going to have for anything else, basically. Like for an IGL or anything English speaking. They're going to have a much easier. There's so many AWPAs around. I mean, there's Mantu is ready and waiting for the call up. Give him a chance.
I think this is the perfect segue into our next segment, right? Because we've got 2 pieces of news that have come out today. And they've literally come out in the hours preceding that we're recording this, right?
Exactly.
So we have Sprout minus Slacks, and we have Nip minus Esatag, and we all know the calamity with NIP with Rez trying to AWP, right? So, firstly, Sprout, I think we can do this one pretty quickly because we've already made a little mini list of players that could probably actually fit on both NIP and Sprout. Maybe one of them would be a bit more Sprout level, but let's go through them, right? So, I've put down 5 names for the Sprout, at least in the Sprout column, but we can interchange them now, of course, considering the NIP news was a bit quicker or a bit more recent. Yeah. So, Mantu, Hades, Zello, Regali, and Farley.
Yeah.
So, let's have a chat about this, guys. I'll let you have the table for a bit.
Okay, I threw Regali in there just because I think if you're any team, I don't care what tier you're in. Well, of course, if you're tier 3 below, fuck off. But tier 1 or 2, if you are in need of an AWPA, Regali is the single best option. He is on the best tier 2 team in the world currently, Copenhagen Flames, who last podcast episode, they were my highlight, And now, 3 weeks on from now, they continue to win. Beat Astralis like 2 days ago in CCT finals. Have continued just to be dominant. And now everybody on Twitter, people are saying, that was in all these threads. And I know you did one as well, Trav, saying, all the wins they've got under their belt and how well they've been performing. They've been fucking killing it. And when you look at their demos as well, they are playing some top CS. Like, it's not tier 2 CS where it's messy or it's super reliant on, individuals to step up. It is really good. I still attest all of it to Birth from Sky. I think he is one of the best IGLs in the entire space at the moment. And everyone he's worked for him, so he's a fucking god. But Regali is playing so well. Like, against teams, and bear in mind that now CCT is getting these injections with these invites, they're getting injections of some, tier 1.5, tier 1 teams, 1.5s like your Astralises, who aren't really tier 1 anymore, but they're still good. And Copenhagen Flames don't care. They still beat them. So I think for the most part, for me, my first choice overall would be Regali. But I think Hades, unfortunately, I don't agree with. As much as I like Hades as a person, I don't think he's consistent enough at tier 1 level, as we've seen. It just didn't work with it, right? And even since he's dropped down into X-Finest, I guess you call them tier 2, I guess you call them. But they are actually like towards the upper level of tier 2. It's not exactly like he's consistently dominating at this level. I think this is his level at the moment. I mean, I feel like he may have more to him, but for now at least, I feel like that's where he stands. Mantu, I think, is really interesting. I don't actually know what's going on with Mantu. I've heard nothing from him. He has been super quiet, but a lot of teams could make Mantu work, and I think that would be quite interesting. Zello, I think, is super interesting because obviously nationality-wise works really well with Sprout. I think that would be a cool little step up. And his performances recently have been fucking bonkers. If any of you go and look at some of the numbers he's been putting up and some of the games he's been playing, I cast one not so long ago. I think it was against Endpoint, I'm pretty sure. And he had an absolutely monstrous performance. But also, of course, just generally having the same nationality as LionX would maybe boost his confidence. And for a player who's so important to Sprout, who's ever so slightly inconsistent at times, if they can get him comfortable, then that's when you can see him farm. And yeah, it was Endpoint. 16-8 against Endpoint. He plays a Nexus, and I was in Thunderpick. I mean, he has just been unreal recently. Some of his performances, stupid. He's averaging a 1.25 rating, which for the grand scheme of things, I guess the caliber of opponents they play against, and with how iffy the rest of his team are, I think Zello would be a really cool one.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, I actually did a video recently, which I'll mention at the end of the podcast, but looking back at clips from the year. And Zello, when he was on Ecstatic in the early portion of this year, there's like 3 or 4 clips just of Zello hitting ridiculous shots, not just with the AWP, but with the rifle as well. I think he's the perfect sort of player that could go to Sprout, especially, with the Romanian bond with LionX, right? So I think that's a really good call. I think actually now looking at it, we mentioned, as we say, we mentioned Mantu in the Sprout column, but I think Mantu, if he is available, I think Mantu is basically the perfect fit for NIP at this point. Mantu can still rifle relatively well, and he's known as an AWPer, so he did it at a relatively okay level in OG. He definitely didn't shit the bed. He played okay. I think NIP, they could make that work. And if Alexi can utilize him well, then I think that's a perfect call. And when it comes to Farley, who I mentioned in the list as well, which I'll just finish off my point with, I think that would be absolutely hilarious if Sprout signed Farley after they said to Astralis, no, you're not having Stare. He's mine. I just think that would be the biggest BM ever. I need to see it happen. But anyway, Paladin, go.
Just a side note, though. Farley's got Ecstatic written all over him. I'm not being funny. There is no fucking shot Farley goes anywhere near tier 1. Not for a while. He has got tricked Ecstatic. Anyone from the Dust 2 DK League. Yeah. He's got that lucky trajectory, brother. It's like, there's no chance he's going straight back up. It would just want to make sense.
I think of all the players that you could pick from right now, Regali does make the most sense. Like, I feel like he is highest. He is like kind of lowest risk, highest reward for a young player as of right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's put his paces through playing on Fnatic before, and it didn't work. Then he went back to Academy, farmed a little bit there, and then moved to CPH Flames and did the impossible to play in Danish as well. Like, keep in mind that's another super big boon that if he wants to move to an all Danish team in the future, that could be a pivot that he could definitely do. But overall, Yeah, he's figured out himself a lot more now, and you can definitely see there's a lot more confidence in him. Credit to Bird from Sky from unlocking him in that sense. And I think that he can make the move up to Sprout or NIP. And keep in mind, I think for Sprout, uh, they just need a marginally better opera. I don't even
Yeah.
think it needs to be some kind of crazy upgrade. Their rifle core is strong enough as it is, and I think that you just output maybe 10 frags more in that role per map, and I think you've got yourself a real winning recipe. Um,
There's a top 8
but
major scene there if they get the AWP sorted out.
yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I
It's
think
like a
RMR
Copenhagen
are like true in
Flames
it.
good
Yeah.
run kind of thing. Yeah, yeah.
But Mantu overall, I think could work on either team. I think you could definitely put him in either roles, either an aggressive AWP or a more passive AWP. He's done both on OG. He's gotten the experience. He's played enough LANs. He's played enough tier 1 teams. So personally, I would drop him in NIP just because I feel as though even though he hasn't played much as of recent in terms of LANs, I think he's got enough experience to slot right in. He's got obviously the synergy with Alexi B playing with him previously. There is no Rugga to potentially patrol him and try to rein him in as he did on OG previously. And I think that kind of duo could definitely work. And you could see, I think Alexi B's taken an affinity to him ever since he has played with him on OG. So overall, I think NIP could just feel like a shoe-in for him. And I think both of these players, Regali and Mantu, should be like destined for greatness on either one
Yeah.
of these teams.
For me, Regali and Sprout, I like in my head that's got to happen. I mean, of course, I think I'm slightly biased in the sense that I've interviewed Regali not too long ago, and in all fairness, I speak to him relatively regularly. I have a chat with him every now and again, especially when he does good stuff like congratulating each other on random shit. Super nice kid, might I say as well. Like really, really mature, really nice, knows his shit, knows his future. Like he knows how talented he is, but he's not like big headed about it. For me, like I think Regali Sprout works just because he plays with all the Danish boys. I mean, he moved from Romania to Denmark when he was like 12. I think I remember you saying. So he's always grown up in the Danish scene as a CS player. So he's played with these. He must play with these guys way back. I mean, that scene is so tight knit. Everybody knows everybody. So he must have been, queuing FPL and on all the rest, or FLC or whatever, with all these guys way back when. So I think it's probably even a case of when they were in need of an AWPer. I bet you might as well. The thing with Slacks, I kind of mentioned on Twitter earlier today, but like that was a necessity of a change. Like Slacks, well, I don't think he's bad. He's inconsistent, and he's just not really. When you look at Sprout as a team, right, and especially after the changes, you're looking at there's a team. So name by name, right? You got to go bring in the IGL, refresh, tier 1 experience as a rifler. Maybe a bit inconsistent, but generally speaking, a very good player in tier 1 who a lot of people like. Had some really cool moments. That 1 versus 5 clutch, I'll never forget it, over towards Inferno. Bonkers, right? Him in the IGL role. He's obviously learnt under Cadian IGLing, so that's really exciting. And he's also like 22, 23. It's not exactly like he's old by any means. And then you've got Lauan X, arguably probably one of the most exciting, biggest prospects of riflers in the entire scene, of youngsters who potentially have this unlimited skill ceiling. He's like Rops in a young way as well, and that's actually who he kind of molds himself off. It's like a young Rops. And then you've got Stare, who his numbers speak for himself. Same age as well. They both joined when they were 17. They're now 18. Barely gone by children, right? They're just about adults, and these guys are putting up ridiculous numbers on a very big stage. And then Zyphon as well. Again, another guy who joined when he was 17, now 18, just on the back of top 8 of the major of Copenhagen Flames, at that fabled run at Antwerp. And, this is a side who is just like young core. Everyone's so excited in terms of the skill ceiling. And then you've got Slacks. And you're like, well, he's not really the same, is he? But this is the thing. Like for them, it's like they always used to qualify for conference through Meisterschaft, and now they've come out like a week or two ago saying, well, we're no longer going to be competing in Meisterschaft. So they don't need this German contingency anymore. They don't need a player there to get the amount of numbers to make it, because they had to bring in Red and Patrick to make up their core 3 for ESL Meisterschaft. They don't need that anymore because they're not competing. So they don't need a German guy. They don't need this allegiance to their country. So it allows so many opportunities for exciting AWPers to come through, and that's where you look towards the likes of, I think Regali, I can't think of any other person who fits in it perfectly, but then Mantu over towards Nip as well. That would be so exciting. As well, for Mantu, I think everyone kind of likes him. He just seems like a lovely dude, right? It'd be nice to see him get an opportunity once again. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be quite exciting.
Mantu to NIP, please.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me ask you the question. Where do you think Esatag can and should go?
Lil Mix.
Lil Mix. God, you're ruthless.
No, I actually
Oh,
like.
dear.
I like. I like Ettertag. I actually think Ettertag is like quite underappreciated, generally speaking. I just think he just does his job, right? But like that's not. CS is going away from that now. I think people are talking about the death of the support role, and Ettertag for me has always been I think Ettertag for me is. He is a jack of all trades and a master of none. That is his title, and he is the king of that title. He can do anything, literally anything, but he's just not phenomenal at everything in a way that some players are. Like for example, if you make a fucking Regali call, I'm sure he shit the bed because he's a fantastic AWPer, but he's not a good IGL. I'm assuming anyway. Same way for other people, but I think one of those people who can do everything. But unfortunately, you don't need that anymore because there's so many people who can just do this one specific role well. And with the def support role, that title that keeps floating around with Inters being gone now as well, is this maybe the case? I don't know, potentially, right?
I think Esatag for Fiku on OG could be a slam dunk. I think I've been very disappointed with Fiku from the time they announced him. I think that they've given him enough time, and I just don't think he's ready for tier 1 just yet. I think he needs a little bit more time to do like a CPH Flames type thing that Regali is doing right now. And I think Esatag is the experience that this team needs. I think you've definitely seen that he can play a little bit more supportive. It's would slot into Fiku's roles pretty comfortably. And I don't know. I think that could be a slam dunk. I think he should stay international for sure.
Yeah. What do you think, Trav? Any thoughts?
I like it. I like that call because that could something that could actually genuinely help OG because Esatag has more experience than Fiku does. I feel a bit bad for Fiku, but in general, actually, I feel bad for Esatag because he's been messed around, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Throughout the Astralis reign, throughout this NIP thing, all that humming and hawing with Device over that period of time, like it's been a rough ride for him in general. And I feel like he deserves more. But hopefully the next team he goes to will deserve more. I'm sure there'll be people, as you say. I mean, all these announcements are coming in at the end of the year, right? Everyone's doing their switching. It's the big time to do all the switches in this Christmas break. So yeah, I reckon there'll be some people in his inbox. Put it that way.
I'd have thought though, just now. I know obviously there was like rumors of them coming back, and there's been nothing announced. But Godsent could be one, just because I know they've had a couple of names that have been leaked and floated about here and there, but nothing's been confirmed. One of the names that was kind of potentially that could have been with them was Pepsor from Fnatic Rising, is now, as of yesterday, been confirmed with Eyeballers, which I think, just a side note, we don't have to deep dive into this. I think it's a really good signing. They need injection of firepower if they're going to be competing in ECL. He's a great player. So with him off the market, maybe for Godsend, that's because I think they want to be going. They're going to a Scandi core. They're a Swedish organization, we're right in saying. So if they're leading in that favor, I think it could work. It could be quite interesting. Who knows? But we can come back to people and all that stuff later on. Should we have a little look at our awards? Are we happy?
Yes.
Happy to. So
let's do it.
We thought we'd do a little like mini awards for 2022. Just talk about a couple of subjects. We don't have any specific fancy graphics, so we're just gonna speak our mind through a couple of things. And we start with quite an easy one: best team of 2022. Who wants to take the reins and why they've gone for their choice?
Well, I mean, I think in the case of us, as we can see right in front of our very eyes, we'll pick the same team, and there's only one obvious logical reason behind it. They won the most. They were the closest to getting an Intel Grand Slam. They'll be probably pretty upset that they didn't get it, considering they were probably everyone's team of the year. Has to be FaZe. There's no other team that could even come close to winning the same amount of S-tier events, and even at the little bits at the end, right, with Heroic and G2 finally winning one. That's Blast only. It's not the prestige that FaZe won. Has to be FaZe, and that's, I think, very simple for everyone.
Yeah. Any touching notes?
I think if you had to give a second, I'd probably give it to Na'Vi. Just because of how close that they got to as many tournaments as they did, at least prior to the SDY move and whatnot. And even with the SDY move, they were pretty competitive overall.
Yeah.
And I think we could have had a very different conversation about Na'Vi if there were a couple rounds and a couple tournaments here or there that just went their favor. I mean, keep in mind, it was like 3-map, 30-round affairs against FaZe both times. And we could have had a very different conversation about both of those teams if a couple different rounds changed up their outcome.
If Twist doesn't pull off one of the best individual plays in one of the most important rounds of the year on Nuke, we can have a completely different conversation about just generally speaking Na'Vi, right? If Twist doesn't do something which will go down in history as one of the greatest plays because of not only the play itself but the precedence around that play, which of course we'll come to later on. But then we could have had conversations about Na'Vi actually, maybe more of a debate here, saying actually, well, Na'Vi this, Na'Vi that, right? Because that would have that could have, hindsight's 2020, but that could have had a massive change because I was looking like a pretty good a-hole, if you ask me, right? So, generally speaking, it could have been a completely different story. So, no, I think you're spot on, but there's no argument here. I think you'd struggle to make justifications any other way. FaZe have just come out of nowhere. FaZe decided to struggle to win as well previously, and are now, at the forefront, the favourites going into pretty much every tournament. So, hey, I mean, of course, you can bring up the major and be like, oh, well, they bombed out. Yeah, but there's always, flash in the pans on the negative side too. So, next one, best player. Now, me and Paladin are on the same route. Travis, on the other hand, an interesting best player. Hit me up with this one.
So, I think this one is based as fuck, and you are happy. I'm happy for you to argue with me about this. So let's go for it.
Okay.
I looked at the top rated. I looked at the best impact. I looked at every single statistic. I looked at how I felt they played in general from what I've watched myself. I looked at purely rating. Simple. ZywOo had one event this year he popped off. Not for me. Simple. Again, top rated player of the year. Probably, it's still everyone's GOAT. No, disputing that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But he just didn't win as much this year, and he didn't have as many of those amazing, just finger snapping moments where you're like, oh my god, he's here and he's taking over the server. So I looked at it a little bit deeper, and I said, okay, we've got two players here that have provided so much impact this year on FaZe that I decided to pick him. And I'm not picking an AWPer because that's boring. I picked the magician, Russell Van Dulken, Twists himself. And I picked Twist because every single time I've watched him play this year, he might actually be slightly lower rated than Rops, but he's been, for me, the most consistent in all the... Sure, you have a few shitters, but like in all the important games, in all the important moments, he won Player of the Year in general. To pull it off, he's just, ice cold. And even in games FaZe would struggle in, I hark back in my memory to the B&E game at the Rio Major. Sure, that was FaZe's one biggest failure of the year. But there was a couple of plays that he did in that Vertigo game, I believe, which just completely pulled FaZe from the absolute, bottom ground floor and pulled them up to an actual workable team again by just doing something ridiculously just individual play. And I just think that he deserves to be recognized for this. I'm seeing people like Launders not even put him in their top 10. And it's like, that's wild to me because he's won the most because it's FaZe. Yeah. He's had ridiculous amount of impact and consistency. I feel like he deserves to be top 5 for me.
However,
at least.
Just however, his lid is shit though. Like it's so bad. Like that gets like a -2. Like that alone.
This is not a hairstyle rating. Leave that one for another time, mate. Come on.
No,
he's been insane.
I do agree. I think he has been unbelievable. And I think as well for HLTV, I'm right in saying like the trophies and the achievements you win as like a team, they take a massive hit, right? Because like in terms of how much. Because I remember a few years ago, Simple was way better rated than ZywOo, but ZywOo won number 1 off the back of he just won everything basically. So that alone should boost all 5 of those FaZe players up a lot, right? Like especially the likes of your Twists and your Rops as well. Those guys put up and Brokey as well, incredible numbers. Then they have the trophies on top. Like surely they should.
And Rops had that little period where he was baiting too much, and I didn't like that. There's situations where he should be there. The communications clearly haven't clicked, and he's not on the site when the last player alive with him has spotted the last 2, almost guaranteed. Like, why wasn't Rops? Just a couple of little factors why I haven't picked Rops over Twist, but we'll get onto Rops in a second because he's going to be in our awards later. But yeah, for me, Twists. You can both argue Simple. I don't mind. It's the obvious choice. I think it's absolutely fair. But I want to do something different. And I think it's worthy. So,
I think that I don't even think Twist was the best rifler this year. Like personally, like I thought that yes, he had a lot of impact, definitely. And there are a lot of memorable moments from Twist, and he is a very key reason why FaZe is always competitive, no matter what the scenario is. But to me, the way I categorize best player of the year is the player that kind of elevated the team to like throughout like entire events, and I think that there are certain players that kind of take the cake for me, and it might not be riflers. I'm gonna probably just mention oppers in this situation because I think that that role has had so much more impact over time now. And even with these nerfs that have come in, I think it's even more so that if you are a good to great to exceptional opper, it has so much more impact these days than compared to a rifle.
Agreed.
And I'm talking players like Shiro at the Rio Major, where I mean C9 was not a good team at the Rio Major. I mean, I had them. I mean, you can go back and look and you can see that I put them to win the major after I saw the bracket. But a large part of it came down to the fact that Shiro was hard carrying them through certain scenarios they should not have won against Imperial, to be completely honest with you. And it came down to Shiro going absolute god mode.
Shiro's my
And
second place.
yeah, and I think that there are so many different scenarios where, I mean, even at Dallas, you could definitely have an argument there as well. A lot of tournaments where they're down and out, Shiro puts up a huge clutch, puts up a huge multi-kill round, and I think that his impact is definitely going to be a huge part as to why I put him very high up in the list. Zywoo as well. I mean, they've had a huge number of issues on their own, just in terms of, you know, the whole English situation and him trying to change languages. And I don't even think he's the most fluent English speaker, and he's still putting up these kind of crazy numbers. That in and of itself is kind of crazy. And I know Simple has been mortal this year in certain situations, but I think that regardless, I think the results that they still get, and you can kind of see the chinks in the armor that have been kind of showing up towards the tail end of this year. Even then, I still think that you look at the numbers that this guy puts up, and I mean, all of that, the ecosystem being as hard as it is, the outside geopolitical situation being as hard as it is, you know, even you know, the community kind of being against him at the Rio Major and whatnot, and all of these factors, he still puts up kind of insane numbers, carries his team throughout a lot of these kind of difficult scenarios, and I think that his impact is understated. Even with the kind of numbers that he's been given, I still think that even though it's not the greatest Simple year, I think it is still the best of the year overall. You know, I think I can't be understated. That's why I put him over everybody else, just because of kind of the position that he's been dropped into, and the kind of numbers that he's putting up, regardless of whatever's around him, right? No matter what kind of storm is brewing around him, he's still putting up the numbers that they've come to expect of him.
Yeah, I feel like both of you, you know, you've had a lot of thought about this, and I've come in very monkey brained and just been like, who is GOAT? Simple. Zywoo? No. Divorce? No. Simple. He wins.
Choro? No.
But that you know, on a more serious note though, just because you brought it up, Alan, who would you but then list your top three riflers, and then list your top three in order, top three riflers and top three AWPers, both of you, and then go off that, because obviously, you know, that should be the bulk of the top 10 anyway. Like obviously, again, for you, Paladin, you probably put Simple number one as the AWPer, but then who takes your number one rifler? If it isn't Twists, then who is it?
Ooh, I think I'd take Nico over Twist overall. And look, I think that definitely their results don't show as much, but individually, I think that he's still put on quite a clinic. And I think Katowice he did very well in. Actually, I can go ahead and try to take a look at specific events this year that he put on a good show. Yeah, okay. So you had spring finals. He had a 1.29 rating. Cologne, he put a 1.11 kind of average. But yeah, EPL, obviously the deeper run for G2 towards this year, 1.23. And again, Katowice 1.2. And at the major in Antwerp, Challenger stage 1.34, and a 1.13 at the Antwerp major itself. So overall, I think that he put on a very, very good show. I think the world final kind of bumps him over the edge for me. Okay. And I think you could make an argument that Axile is somewhere in that conversation as well.
Yeah. And then
that's fair.
Trav?
So riflers, when it comes to AWPers, I agree with that. I'm going to go Simple, Shiro, Zywoo for me. Yeah. In that order. When it comes to riflers, I'm going to go I think it's only fair to say, considering I put him best player of the year, only fair to stick to my guns and say Twist. I'm going to say Twist, Nico, Stown, but I really want to
Stown.
give honorable mentions to Frozen and to who is that? I had his name right here. Yes, I did. To Frozen and Shush, because I think that sometimes you have to look a bit deeper in terms of it's not just the highest rated, it's not just the flashiest player. I've obviously got my flashiest in the top 3. I mean, Twist, Nico, Stown is absolutely god tier, but looking at Frozen, he is at that level this year. He's had his best year yet, without a shadow of a doubt. He's taken up the mantle of on Mal Sports ever since they added all their new academy players. Right, he's now the main man and is taking it up really beautifully. But my honorable mention of Shush is there purely to mention of the fact that I don't think anyone did their role in a team better this year than Shush. I thought he played his support role and his anchor roles, especially on some maps. It does everything right at every single given opportunity from what I've watched of him, and I think it's super impressive. But yeah, obviously that's only an honorable mention, and the top 3 are the stars, but still.
I agree with the authors. Just the one name that I just want to throw out there is Rifles. For me, I would go Axel 1, Nico 2, and probably number 3 I got Stown, but potentially changing Stown out. And you might kill me for this, but I just as a rifler, I think individually, just as him solely, Keisarata's had a fucking good year. He's had a fucking good year. Like, I'm being funny as well. Furia as a whole haven't, but Keisarata doesn't falter. The stats and numbers he's been putting up on a pretty flailing Furia roster have been pretty damn good. Like, Keisarata for me is someone who I don't know if he pushes Stown off 3rd, but it's bloody close. I potentially might have to have a little bit of like a more deep dive into it because I really do like Stown as a rifler, but Keisarata's had a great year. Even when Furia generally haven't won a lot or competed too well, he's been good.
And he had this huge big game issue, right? And him overcoming that this year is also something to know of. And the fact that he performed at the Rio Major, he wasn't the issue in their elimination, and that in and of itself shows a lot of growth from this player. He has been putting these kinds of numbers up for a long time, but it's that last gear that really I think you can make the case for to put him in that top 3.
And biometric too, about like how he elevates the team. I feel like he single-handedly elevated Fury because I think if you have just anyone else, any other kind of rifler, whatever, you just get a carbon copy of any of the other 4 of their stats and put it in. That Fury starts doing fuck all, but he has elevated that team. So that's why for me he potentially comes in just on the fact that like, I feel like even if Stown, I know Stown's had a cracking year as well, but the rest of that heroic side have actually also all been really, really good as well. Like you said, Shush has been a fantastic role player. I still like Yabi as a rifler, while a lot of people question him, generally speaking. So that's the only one that for me that maybe is a little bit of a wild card to have a think about.
Yeah. I made a team of the year. Sorry, I made a team of the year on Ted's podcast that he asked me to make, and I had some players that I would interchange. Right, my original choice was Shiro, Yakinda, Twist, Stown, and Keisarato. Okay. You could replace Yakinda with Axile. That's a perfect for me. I think that's a perfect like for like. And again, you could look at maybe adding a Nico and maybe adding, with the ones we've mentioned previously too, like a Frozen. Yeah. So I love that team. I think Keisarato is just been. I could not agree with you more about Keisarato. I think he's been the best Brazilian player for the last 3 years, or at least 2 years, and could even be the best Brazilian player for the next 2 or 3 coming as well. I think he's that good. And he's going to be around for a very long time to come, and has sort of elevated himself slightly above Yuri now as well in my book.
I agree.
If we want to give an honorable mention to a supportive player of the year, I have to give mine to Perfecto. I think Shush did very, very well, but Perfecto, man alive. I mean, this guy went above and beyond in the clutch as of recent, and that is one elevated part of Perfecto that I wasn't expecting, because he plays his anchor roles very, very well. He stalls for a time for some of the best players in the world very, very well. And I think that little bit of a clutch factor and into pulling Navi over the line over a lot of difficult scenarios throughout this year. I got to give him credit from that first half of the year, especially really put on a clinic. And in the second half of the year, you could definitely see that he was putting up the numbers that people were expecting from players like Bit. And the fact that Perfecto was able to do it in the roles that he was in, I think I have to tip my hat to him to
Agreed.
kind of go above and beyond for that squad.
Shush and Perfecto, god tier team players this year. Absolutely, I think they're superb, and that's why I added like a more passive rifler in that team of the year I made, right? Like a K Serato, because while he doesn't do that sort of thing like Shush and Perfecto do, he often, you could argue, plays for himself on Furia quite many situations. Yeah, he's been absolutely superb, and yeah, I think that now means we can go on to best roster move.
Roster move. Travis, you want to take the lead with this one? Best roster move?
So we've all picked one, so I'll get that one out of the way and let you discuss that one later on in more detail. Rops to FaZe, it did happen in 2022, and I think that it absolutely, no shadow of doubt, elevated them to the next level, so that's a fair one to add. The other one's a bit of a mixture. I decided to choose Rops to FaZe, and then my second place, almost as good choice for me, is actually Yakinda to Liquid, because Liquid were a team looking like they were down in the dumps, not having too much fun, and they were just seeming like they had no spark. Yakinda arrives, the spark's there. He helps out Nitro with some leading and some ideas from his time with Outsiders and Jame, and just like that, they become deep playoff contenders. And that's for me reason why for me couldn't have been a better choice for Yakinda and for Liquid this year. And that's why I think it deserves to be in the top 2 choices.
Annie, what have you
Definitely up there. Yeah, definitely up there. And I think you could definitely. I think the biggest part is the energy levels, as you're mentioning, and you could see that completely changed how some of these players perceive the game. Elige especially. Obviously, his numbers don't necessarily reflect that, but he definitely looks like a much more happier player, and you want that guy as comfortable as possible on that roster. A lot of the moves happen because of him. At least that's what's been told, and the rumors have been swirling around that organization in general. But for me, I think that Rops to FaZe is going to be my move of the year, and it's a little bit more of a kind of technicality. It was like at the very beginning of the year, prior to Katowice, I believe, or Blast Groups. I'm not really sure. But the whole reason as to why is basically Rops finding his true home and his true system that he works best in, and it was always under Kerrigan. It always has been, even under Mouse. That's where he looked best. And sure, you can definitely make the conversation that he baits a lot of the time. Sometimes the communication is not there. Sometimes he leaves his team out high and dry. But overall, I have not seen Rops more comfortable in a system with the player that he is, specifically within FaZe, in comparison to any of his other rosters that he's been a part of. And you could see there was the tail end of Mouse that he looked even worse in the sense that he looked like a very frustrating player to play with, where he would bait for his team, he would play for numbers. But now, as of right now, I think the impact that this guy has had in clutch scenarios. I mean, you think about, I don't know, it was the World Final or was it the Fall Final? I think it was the Fall Final. Yeah, the Fall Final where he's playing against NIP. This is their final buy as a CT on Nuke.
Yeah.
Gets a 3 or 4K on the bottom B site of Nuke on top of Silo. And then obviously you have Katowice where he pulls FaZe into OT against G2 on Porch side with another boost on top of Porch. That, like, those kinds of plays are plays that I think players can have once in their career, and the fact that this guy is having it once, twice, 3 times across all these events across this year, I think you really got to tip your hat to kind of the level of impact that he's had. And overall, I've made him my move of the year because it's really elevated beyond what olofmeister could ever produce for FaZe Clan. Overall. So credit to him.
I agree. I think I put Rops to FaZe as well. I think one that maybe in my eyes a little bit better, Shox to Liquid. What a transfer. That one. Menesi to G2 is one I threw out there as well. I just think he's the wonder child, isn't he? Like, he is just this he's in a sense made G2 so unbelievably scary, where before they would compete, but no one would ever really care about them. In a way, it was like, oh, okay, G2 are there, but the big boys will actually take him out. They just in and around the fringe, bringing this guy of Menesi, and my God, like, he's so scary. Just come off the back of course, an MVP at Blast as well at the grand final. So seriously good player. So Menesi's a G2 out there for me. Another one for out as well, just because of, I think, the impact these two have had and kind of how they've revitalized their career. Magisk and dupreeh, the Vitality, the duo, right? I really like that transfer. Like, I think originally a lot of people thought it was an absolute shit show, and of course the Zonic is like the trio to round it off. But I think they've stabilized that team in a way and allowed them to find success. ESL Pro League 16 champions. While they are so yo-yo-y in terms of their performances, I generally think that they are they're not big hitters. They're not these kind of like, like a Manesi or like a Rops. These are guys who are coming in and expected to drop 1.2, 1.3 ratings every map in and out. These two aren't. They know they've got ZywOo to do that. Apex as well can, as the IGL, put himself in favorable positions. So I think for me, I really like, just generally speaking, Magisk and Dupree as transfers, just because I think they've been able to essentially stabilize this roster in a way, alongside of course Zonic, and they found success from it. So they've been more competitive now than they ever have in a way. They've never really been that scary prior. It was just like, oh, okay, we'll shut down ZywOo and then we're okay. But if ZywOo has one of those games, well, what can we do? It's ZywOo, we can't stop the kid. But now finally they look stable, and ZywOo of course looks really happy, and of course for them to be doing it for him in another language, of course, I mean, we saw, was it 2-3 years ago when it was, I want to say Freya was going up to and interviewing him, and he's like, no, like he just,
As the London Major.
Yeah, London Major,
So
2018, right?
yeah.
So 4 years ago, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Jesus, time flies. But you know what I mean, right? You're like, 4 years ago, the only word in English he knew was no, essentially. No. So, and he's on a new language to a point now where he's like so fluent you wouldn't even realize that he's only just learned it. But I met ZywOo. I met him at the Stockholm Major end of 2021, and I had a conversation with him in the bar. His English is as good as anyone's. Like, it's just, there's a little subtle flex there, I gotta say. But standing next to this guy at a bar and a drink with him, and asking him, this is just as Vitality got announced. It got announced while at the Stockholm Major, basically, of like Magisk and Dupree coming. Because they'd been knocked out at this point, and I think this was on the day of the semis. This is the day after they lost an RV in the quarters, and yeah, speaking to him, I was asking him about it. He's like, I'm really excited. Like, it seems good. I like the guys, and it'd be interesting to have Zonic as a coach. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, these three were part of arguably one of the best ever rosters in CS:GO history. So I'm on a full on conversation with this guy. There was no broken English or anything. I didn't misunderstand. So credit to him. So I think for me that those two go in. But generally speaking, Rops the Face has to be the one, because they are now the strongest team. We put them as the best team, and he's one of the players that's allowed them to be the best team. So nice and easy. Of course, on top of that, we put best event of 2022, and as somebody who attended it, Trav, why have we all agreed on this one?
Oh, it's been the best for years. The best crowd. IEM Cologne. The grand final, the fact it was so insane this year, one of the best BO5s in all of Counter-Strike history, maybe even arguably the best ever. Just being there, feeling the atmosphere. I was at the top of the arena, I was at the bottom in the premium area, I was all over the place getting these amazing shots of just a full crowd. And in a grand final and in the Lanxess, there's a reason they call it the Cathedral of Counter-Strike. It's the reason why everyone has this event and holds it in such high regard. It was absolutely glorious. You meet so many amazing people when you're there. You get to share these amazing moments with friends and all like-minded people. No one's ever rude to you. Everyone's always very nice. And even the experience of watching it when I have done, for example, in the previous years that I didn't go, I went 2019, then of course 2020 and 2021 would have been no crowd due to the restrictions, COVID restrictions. So I had to go again this year, and it was absolutely worth it. And even for at home, watching it in 2018, 2017, still one of the best events. Yeah. Still will be, it still deserves to be. And it was just cherry on the cake this year that the grand final was absolutely unbelievable. So
just generally speaking as well, for those of you who get the opportunity, go and visit Germany. It is one of my favorite countries to go to. It's so cool.
I love Cologne.
Yeah. This year, I went to Berlin and I went to Munich, just holiday-wise. I loved both of them. They're so cool. Never been to Cologne, so it's next on the list, to say the least. But yeah, like Germany as a country is just awesome. So to have an amazing Counter-Strike event there as well, I mean, undoubtedly some of the best CS:GO we've had all year. That final, like, not one to forget.
As a viewer, whenever before the game starts, there's usually like that horn that plays right before, and I think there is not one sound effect in Counter-Strike, like as far as TOs are concerned, that gets me hyped for a game before. And it has always been something that I've been I've had a huge love for. And overall, I think the prestige of this tournament will always be unrivaled. I don't think that like even I mean you can even make the conversation. I think like the majors were disappointing in comparison to this event here.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think as far as how it was run better than both the
Agreed.
majors this year. I think.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have the greatest playoff bracket. I'll give you a reminder. This is Mao's with Astralis with Farley still. Movistar Riders making their dream run, and it's also against the Liquid that was having Ekadar as a stand-in. So we're still kind of wishy-washy with how good Liquid was. And then that kind of made disappointing semifinals with Navi and Astralis and FaZe and Movistar. But at the end of the day, we still got, I think, arguably the greatest CS match of all time. And that in and of itself just kind of rectifies everything else. Like, regardless of the group stage, regardless of the playoffs, everything that's going to be sticking into our minds is that FaZe Navi Grand Final. I mean, there were so many people from outside of our esport that was watching this game that suddenly was so much more involved in it. It just got so much more eyeballs into our game in general. And I think overall, the kind of dedication and honestly, it was the reason why the game was so good was just the firepower was at an all-time high for one. And then for two, I think the tactics were also at an all-time high. And that's what was so cool. It was just really the pinnacle of Counter-Strike through and through all perspectives of the game. And that is what made it so exciting for anybody watching. I mean, whether you're a new fan or an old one, there was something for everybody throughout it. And that's what just made it just so captivating.
No, I agree. I mean, what an event. I think this year, it just gets better and better every year anyway. So, I mean, I can't even wait. I think that a lot of people make arguments, and I'm part of them in a way that, for me, Cologne is more prestigious than majors. Like, I think some of those majors are very, like, wishy-washy. Like, I think the Rio one, you know, having Heroic Outsiders as a final, for me, there's arguments to be made that it was more of a prestige to be, you know, champions of Cologne, and it's such a sick event as well. So, yeah, easily. I mean, realistically, going into it, we should have been doing this episode and saying it was Rio, but it just wasn't the case, unfortunately. It didn't live up to the hype. It didn't live up to the expectations, especially as well. So, here's what it is, ladies and gents. But next one, best moments of the year of 2022. So now we're going to go for kind of a couple for here, right? So, Paladin, do you want to kickstart us, and then Trav, then I'll take the rear?
Sure, I guess we kind of all did some kind of like personal thing that we did this year, and then also an event or a moment that happened kind of in the scene in general. And so for me, event-wise, conference, I did season 16 of conference alongside Nao, and I think that's very much so the event that sticks out to me. We had a whole week to be in Stockholm, and I think it was the first time I actually got to explore the city. It's very, very beautiful. Games are very, very good. We had a lot of great times and great moments. I'm kind of hoping that we get more of that kind of opportunity next year. But as far as moments in terms of the game itself, I got to tie it back to Cologne again and say Twist out Mini to eliminate Navi from Nuke. There was that final round of play at Cologne where, you know, the play to set up Twist like that was just absolutely insane. To do that with the amount of pressure that was in the server and to do it with the amount of poise that he did was absolutely sublime. So credit to Twist to kind of just absolutely blowing my socks off to kind of encapsulate what I felt about Cologne in general.
What have you got, Trav?
I agree with you. I think it was superb. So for me, I've gone for a little bit of a selection, and it's actually quite a nice selection. If we're going to just get the personal one out of the way first, I'll say ESL Valencia. Challenger Valencia was unbelievable. Being to be in studio for the first time, experience what that's like, and just ditto basically everything Paladin said. So put that to one side. For me, I've picked two that really stand out in my mind. The first one will be Munazy's 1v4 on Inferno, because that one, the one that you're thinking of now, where he's in between two players, has to try and find a way to plant the bomb. Sure, you can look at it as if to say, well, the enemy shouldn't have let him do that. Like, it's usually the enemy's fault when a player clutches, right? But this was the clutch that showed his mechanics, his speed, his ridiculousness in the clutch, and at the age that he's at, and the fact it was a new signing to G2 at the time, it was all about announcing him to the big stage. This was the best way to announce a player that might be around in our scene for 10 more years, maybe more. I think
He's
that's just
17 now, is he, or 16 still?
it could be here for a decade
Yeah.
plus. It's unbelievable. I think that was just absolutely a incredible way to announce himself to the world of CS and in a big event as well. And my second one, which I honestly I think is just as good as that, was Simple's speech at Katowice this year
Yeah.
to the crowd on stage with all of his teammates. For a man who doesn't speak English as a first language, he articulated the thoughts of possibly the whole world as the Ukraine and Russia conflict kind of got underway and everyone was very upset and all the videos are being posted online and Simple's hometown is literally the one that's being bloody bombed, for fuck's sake. Like, his words, the hearts in chat went on for half an hour. It was an unbelievable show of heart, support for his own country, and just in a plea that love should trump all. And for someone who, when he was younger, was known for a bit of hate, for him to be the one to be the face of that was absolutely perfect and could not have been said better.
No, I agree. I mean, for me, like part of the bench is the same one for me, conference. But I think generally this year, on a personal sense, best moments, there's been quite a few. I think conference was probably one of the best just because, I met Paladin. Great moment of the year. But just generally, like, that was it kind of lit the fire under me in a way. I think I enjoyed commentating and working in esports, and I thought, this is sick. Like, I never thought about that at that point of this being a career properly. And then that really lit a fire under me. Like, first of all, I fucking love this. This is so much fun. I get to talk and live. I get to fly to another country to talk about a game that I love and watch for free anyway, and I get paid to do it. Not too shabby. And it really made me super motivated. Hence why, like, you can kind of see from conference onwards, my involvement in CSGO and esports as a whole massively spiked. I mean, I think from then on, I uploaded like 27 or 28 of my 34 videos this year from then onwards. So you can kind of see where, like, the vast bulk and majority of my that came from. I think another one that I kind of also didn't write down, but I kind of have to throw out there as well, is working the RMR. I mean, working both the open and closed quals. I mean, granted, I was working online, but to be in some way a part of a major, and then on top of that as well, doing watch parties. Well, it was the U-Boys, which in some way might be involved in a BBC documentary called Made of Madness. Is not too shabby either. So, like, that entire kind of, like, that major cycle for me was pretty exciting, because I just had somehow being involved when it didn't really look like I was going to be involved at any point. I didn't expect to be, and then that was. So that was pretty sick. But yeah, so that whole conference, and then conference, of course, after Melbourne in person was amazing as well. I really felt super confident and comfortable, and I love being on the desk then. It was really good fun. So that was good. And then yeah, for my play or my thing of the year, twists, that main play, jumping down on towards electronic, no idea, flying down. I can get it up. I've got it here. I'll play it. I'll play it for a bit. I'll even share my screen. I'll play it for everybody to see, so we can all take a look at this bonkers play once again by Twists. Oh my god. And of course that won esports player of the year or whatever that award show is. It won player of the year, and pretty rightfully so, because not only was the play absolutely bonkers, the implications around it were unbelievable as well, because that got into 15 and was a sick game. So yeah, that for me, play of the year, best moment of the year. I remember watching that on Discord with friends, and we were all just fucking losing it, just absolutely losing it. So yeah, sick time. So that goes as my best moment. But I do want to say a good runners-up is Simple's speech, because that was some pretty moving stuff. So good shout out there. We'll on to another one, interesting one. Ones to watch for 23. Now this is I guess we haven't really set any rules for this, but for the most part, it kind of looks like we're all going down the route of youngsters who might have a bit of a breakout year heading into 2023. So who wants to kickstart us here? Because I've actually got quite a few as well that I haven't written down that I'm just going to throw out. I'm not going to explain them too much, but I'll just throw the names out there. So who wants to start us off?
I'll kick us off because we've already said one. Regali is on the lips of literally everyone in the scene. I think we've already gone over why he should be, a big name going into next year. So we'll gloss over that. I also added Shuey because he had such a big sort of explosion on the scene through Mouse NXT and then actually getting Game Legion to the major that I feel as though I'm almost concerned, but also fascinated to see how he does. Can he progress Game Legion further? Can he keep them as a tier 2 team to watch and a tier 2 team to worry about? Or will he be poached and will he do well in a better team? Because I actually am not sure. It could go either which way of it. That's why I said he's one to watch, because it's a really interesting career path. He wasn't the one who was picked to be promoted to Mouse. He still did great. Can he do any more?
Okay, I like it. Paladin, what have you got? Are you muted, Paladin?
Paladin, I think you are muted,
Paladin,
my
I
good
think
man.
you are muted.
I'm muted?
This is a work-from-home Zoom moment right there.
Yeah, no, this happens all the time. I've done this on so many broadcasts.
Stop pressing page up. Just use your scroll wheel.
I know. But yes, I loved all the work that Shuhei did this year. Overall, I definitely agree with Trav. I thought he got kind of given the finger out of all the players in the Mouse NXT.
Yeah.
Obviously, beyond that and Shane. But I think overall, I think Shuhei put in so much work on the NXT roster, and I think he's the reason why that organization was as successful as it was. And you could definitely see that ever since his departure, they've been a shadow of themselves. And even when Shuhei didn't have the best possible roster on NXT, he still made it work. So overall, credit to him, and I hope that he does get the step up eventually. But for my two players that I've picked, I've gone with two Danes. Buzz, who is supposed to be getting picked up by Astralis, and I think that he is definitely a player that has been in that conversation around the Danish scene for quite some time now. Did some great work on Masonic. I loved what he did, and towards the tail end of his Mad Lion stint as well, that's kind of where I got put onto him as a player in general. And he's put in a lot of very impressive stuff.
Yes.
And he'll be replacing Mister, I believe. And I'm not really sure if that'll be the biggest upgrade out the gates, but I think if they give him enough time, I think it could definitely work. And then my second player will be Stair, the player that is being rejected from Astralis because Sprout want to hold on to him for a little bit longer.
Yes.
And as we said before, they'll be getting potentially a better offer, I'd assume, than Slacks. And overall, this guy has been consistently just an outstanding entry player. I've not had any qualms with him. I mean, some of the first bullets that he's had throughout this year have been absolutely insane. And I am very, very excited to see what he produces next year, because sky's the limit for this guy. He can get poached by any team, international. He can definitely prove that he can play on an international team as well. So I think this guy has some unbounded potential, and I hope that we can actually see it realized throughout next year.
Yeah, so originally for me, the first person I was going to put on this was Lawan X, but I think everybody kind of knows about him now, so I didn't include him in mine just because I feel like he's getting the notoriety that he sort of deserves. He's kind of already in a lot of those, on the edge of a lot of people's tongues. But Stair as well, I think, is mechanically as good as Lawan X, but mentally better. He's smarter, he's stronger in terms of that sense as well. So I think Lawan X at times can go missing or can beat himself up if there's not a good game, and it can affect him in the series. That doesn't affect Stair. So I think for me, he goes into mine. Regardless, I'll always sing that guy's praises, maybe call it bias, but I really do think he's unbelievably talented, and I just love that Copenhagen Flames roster, generally speaking. So for me, it's sick. And Buzz as well, another one. I spoke to the Vorborg back just after he left Flames, before he joined EG, whenever that was. We're back in halfway through the year or whatever. And Vorbot mentioned it. He said, this Buzz kid's sick. If I was to rebuild Flames, I would probably pick up Buzz or TMB, something like that. So, if back then he was thinking about it, it's got to be pretty damn good. I do have a few other names that I just wanted to throw out. I won't go into too much detail in terms of them individually. I just think they're pretty good. Yimfat from Mars NXT. I think he's the best player on that Mars NXT roster. And he is only 15. I think he's only just turned 15 as well, which is scary. He's the younger brother of the band guy. What's his name? No, is it Sergey?
I think it's Sergey.
Oh, okay, no. I wasn't sure if it was the guy who went to Valorant and got banned. I know it was one of the Finns.
You mean
What's the one who got?
Oh, how can I
Yeah.
not remember that name?
The
I
one who
know
got
it.
banned.
Finish Orpa.
Yes.
Finish Orpa.
And he went to. He plays
I
for
literally
Liquid.
saw his
Yampi.
tweet the other
Yampi,
day. Thank
Yampi,
you.
Yampi. I wasn't sure if it was
Thank
Yampi or one of them, but he's the younger
Okay.
brother of some Finnish pro anyway. But he's unbelievable. Miles XT are pretty shit, generally speaking now. Anyway, but
Yeah.
he is sick. So I'll throw out him just 'cause I think he's really good. Another player who I feel like a lot of people sleep on, but I really do like. Not one who's really slept on because of his performance at the RMR. Wrinkle from Bay, I think, is very, very good, and he's only like 17, I'm pretty sure. So he's so talented. I can see him getting picked up by a bigger roster. And he's Ukrainian. I don't think that's going to affect anything, but he's really, really good. So I like Wrinkle, individually speaking. There's a couple that I was thinking of adding. I don't think it's really even worth like your tier 2 AWPers that have been around here, like Decos and Hans, but we already sort of know that. So I'm thinking more of the younger ones. Essentially, Wrinkle was kind of one I thought then in terms of a better replacement. Detour's another one. I don't know if you guys have ever got the chance to cover him, but he's a pretty impressive rifler.
Eklot?
Yes,
Eklot,
Eklot.
yeah.
And Eklot have looked really decent recently. And I like Detour. This guy seems to put up some pretty decent numbers. And he's only 19 years of age. It's not exactly like he's old by any means. He's a fairly decent rifler who seems very stable and a lot more mature than he is. And if I'm going to be biased, I would probably throw Cypher out there from the UK. I still think he is the highest potential of any player coming out of the UK scene at the moment. He is unbelievably talented. And with Into the Breach now collapsing because they're doing a redacted shit show, I think Cypher is one of those players who could so comfortably go international and make it work, or so comfortably elevate any team that speaks English. He's so good. So,
Yeah.
a bit of bias there, but I thought I'd have a bit UK bias. I did have one thrown to me, though, and I did a bit of research about this yesterday. I didn't know too much about him before I had a look into him, but a guy called Wicadia, he's on Eternal Fire Academy, and apparently, domestically speaking within Turkey, he's regarded as the next Xantares. But from what I can see, and from the couple of clips and videos I've seen of him, he seems pretty damn good. He's on like 17, based in the Academy League for Eternal Fire's Academy roster. And he's good. And with the Eternal Fire, that being, I think, comfortably take the title of worst run organization of the year. And, undoubtedly, Major's going to get dropped again at some point. So if they want changes, that guy as a youngster seems pretty damn good. If they want to go, for another youngster alongside the likes of, Xcloud and whatever, and with Woxic and no longer being a part of it, Xantares doing whatever, I think potentially he looks pretty good. I don't know too much about him, so I'm not exactly going to claim this as my own thing being thrown out there. I really like him individually just because I think he's very, very good. Last one I just want to throw out just because it's biased. I just got a reminder of it from ESL Conference 16. The GOAT U-Jerks just qualified for Conference 17. He won Conference 16, or he advanced in Conference 16 with FTW, then got picked up to Saw. We love For the Win. We love Jerks, the GOAT, because he was one of the most memorable parts of working Conference. But having casted Saw in the Grand Finals against Spirit 2 days ago, or a day ago, 2 days ago, they beat them 3-1 overall in the best of 5, and he was unbelievable. He was the best player, undoubtedly the best player. So I'm pretty sure I think he's less than 20, so it's not exactly like he's old by any means. So technically still a youngster. Jerks is my goat Jerks. I love him. And there's an FTW jersey somewhere in my room, which I would show him if I knew where it was. But essentially, yes, Jerks technically goes in the youngster category, even though he's already done it. But now going to conference, and I actually think there's a very good shot that they go to Pro League if FTW are able to do it, and they dismantled everybody in Challenger League, especially Spirit. They did it twice. It was not exactly like it was a fluke as well. They did it in a best of 3, then in a best of 5, and it was comfortable. I casted both of them, and it was very plain sailing. So if you'd expect Spirit to be a side who would make Pro League, generally speaking anyway, or a side like Forza, who you maybe can assume, Saw beat both of them, and with ease. So for me, in my eyes, I think there's a real world in which they can make Pro League and be the second Portuguese side, and Jerks this time actually gets to go to Pro League. It might be another FTW repeat, but Jerks is still my go. So a few names thrown out there, but I had a pretty decent thought about it. So there we go.
Do you want some live mid podcast news before we go on to our penultimate little segment? It's not huge, but do you remember Gade from North?
I do.
He's announced that he's departing the CS industry, so he won't be on another team in any point in the near future because he's going to be starting a new career in a whole new environment.
When was he last on a team?
2
Big,
years
I
ago.
believe, right? Would probably be the last time
Who?
that he was
A
part
bit
of
of
a
a bit
roster.
on big, yeah, and that was about it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
The thing about Gade is that I thought that there was definitely a window where he could have run away with his career, and had a very, very tenured one. But I guess the window just kind of shut on him, and ever since then, I mean, I think the big move was kind of like, okay, this is your last opportunity, and it didn't go as planned. And it was for Xantares as well, I believe. And so
Yeah.
that whole shindig didn't necessarily sit right with me, and I don't think it sit right with most of the community. And I understand. Like I think that it makes sense. I mean, I could like to see him in a coaching role. I think the Danes have definitely given a liking to suggest that he's a really good IGL. Like he could be a very good IGL. Like he's got a good mind for the game.
Yeah.
So maybe he could be coaching. Maybe he could be a GM. But yeah, I think there's still room for Gade in the CS industry for sure.
Just a side note. I like to think about this. What do players do when they just stop playing CS, but they don't go into coaching or management? Like, there's no way he just becomes an accountant, right? Like, or just like.
Isn't he like genuinely really smart? Like, I remember something about like he's got a degree in something. I actually can't remember. I mean, Gade Liquipedia. I don't think there'll be anything on his Wikipedia about it, but
Maybe
I'll
the
have a quick
trivia.
look.
Like, scroll down.
Yeah, there's no trivia, so yeah. I
Damn.
mean, I'm convinced that he's got something that he
Something
can
going for him.
most certainly go into a different career with. But yeah, he was a good player, and it's kind of a shame. But there we are. That's life, isn't it? Everyone moves on at some point. He's 28 now, so
He's
There you
getting
go.
on a bit. Yeah, not much left in him. So fair enough. Unlucky.
fair play.
Moving on.
All right, so we've got our special penultimate segment, which is pretty interesting, and it actually has a lot of
Yes.
names,
Yeah.
Neo,
Sorry.
which we've just gone on. No, you're fine, mate. There's a lot of names that
Yeah.
we've already spoken about. To be fair,
As you can tell,
And-
I've enjoyed this specifically because this has been on my mind for a long time. Like I'm talking like when the announcement came out. Well, we spoke about this 2 or 3 podcast episodes ago. So it's been a while, and I've just brainstormed this since. But who wants to take first crack at it?
so pretend we're TSM. Build our tier 2 roster going into 2023, and that's because TSM did say they're not going to buy out a roster; they want to build their own.
Yes.
So I picked 2 names we've already spoken about. In fact, 3 names we've already spoken about: Shui, Regali, and Stare. That is, an insane start. We had a bit of an argument. That's a lie. It wasn't an argument. It was a who takes Stare, who takes Lau and X. But
Yeah.
I decided to take Stare in this instance.
Yeah.
And my other players would be Rainwaker, probably one of the best players on Skade, and
Agreed.
currently still playing very well on 502.
Yes.
I think he's genuinely deserves a shot in a non-Bulgarian team. I think he can really do it in EU. And because I wanted to go for another star, but I thought, support player, who do I like the most? I want to save Xfloud from Eternal Fire, so I picked him.
Hell yeah.
Save that boy, please. Please do.
Look, I will go next because Neo's got
I got
quite a
some-
few permutations, so I will leave him to the end. But I've kept the same 2, Shuhei and Regali. I think that both of them are kind of undeniably the top 2 free quote unquote free agents, at least for TSM. Like I could definitely see them paying the buyout. And I think that's probably going to be the most expensive that they'd have to do.
Yeah.
The third player that I've picked is Mihu, and I think that he'll be my more
Nice.
aggressive rifler. He's a pretty stable anchor. He did very good work with Apex, carrying them all the way through advanced, qualifying for ECL. So I like the work that he's done. He's definitely shown that he's had experience as well. I think he's been largely given the short end of the stick on most of his rosters, even with Apex, just as a quick recent example.
Yeah.
I think that he could definitely have more of a stable roster with this TSM organization. So I have him as my third. I have Fesser as my fourth player. You want to get a more young player on this squad, you could definitely look to Fesser. There's obviously this whole attitude issue that's being thrown around
Yeah.
for sure. But I think overall, Fesser could really work for this squad just in terms of the amount of firepower that you need when you've got a caller like Shuhei. I think you could definitely look to Fesser to be that young star, that Launex type player, if you will. And then for the final player, I was kind of thinking between 2 players. I mean, when Trav brought up Rainwaker, my mind went to Ships, who is another very fiery Bulgarian
Just
player
as
who
good.
could definitely put up some numbers, and you've seen that he can put up numbers on a myriad of teams across his career. You think Wendigo, you think 500, and you think Contact as well towards the tail end of that. If That's a real throwback for you guys at Flashpoint, but
Yeah,
he
yeah.
did
I remember,
very,
yeah.
very well to play on that bad of a roster. So ships could work, but I think my heart has mostly been leaning towards more experience, and I'll lean to Apex again, and I go to Jacob. I
Yep.
think this guy's still got some more years left in him. I think he's definitely put on enough of a show on Apex that he could still compete against the top levels of competition, and I think that he's definitely a stable anchor player and a very flexible player to allow for these youngsters like a Fester, like a Regali, to kind of stretch their legs a little bit more on
Mhm.
this roster, and Jacob to be a bit more stable. So that's my 5 lineup.
I like that. I like that. So I was originally thinking Fessa as well, and
Here we go.
But there was two reasons. So Fessa is the same as another guy. I didn't put them in because of alleged attitude problems, and the other one I didn't put in was Red Star. Because Red Star is unfucking believably good, but apparently he's very difficult to work with. Hence why he doesn't play in the Bulgarian rosters, even though he's statistically way better than any of them. So those two, for that reason, I didn't include them. But I went with 2 European rosters with 5 different people on each, basically. So like there's like 10 to pick from, and you can kind of just mix and match however you want to do it. So Shuhei, Regali, Lauren X, Esatag, and Rainwaker as one. Don't know if things would work. I'm kind of also leaning in the space of similar to an Outsiders, where we just kind of we sit down as a group and we all just agree, fuck support players, basically. Just fuck them. We don't need them. Fuck them. But then Esatag would technically be our support player there, jack of all trades. So I kind of brought him as a stable factor, but generally speaking, Shuhei, Regali, Lauren X, Esatag, Rainmaker is one permutation that I could go for. Another one would be Bird from Sky, Mantu, Stare, IM, and Yimfat, right? So, not that... Basically, the way I've done these first 2 is not that I want the rosters to be those specific 5. It would be a mixture of the 10. I mean, if I had a choice of IGL, while I love Shuhei, I'd actually go for Bird from Sky. I think he's better. I think he's smarter,
Fair play.
way more experience, and... Oh, he's fucking proving it because he's winning everything. So I go for him. If I had to go for an Orpa, I'd probably also then go for Regali. Funnily enough, of course, another from Copenhagen Flames, just because those two, their achievements speak for themselves. I'd probably then, in terms of if I had to go for a rifler, go for Stare and play him as an entry. I was kind of juggling between Stare and Lauren X, but I think I should go for Stare just because I think he's a little bit more consistent, generally speaking, while Lauren X has the star factor about him. For support-ish player, Estag would work, but if I don't want to go support, I'd probably actually then go for IM, because I just really like IM as a player. I think he's really talented. And I think he might have a bit of a breakout year in towards next year as well. It's someone definitely to keep an eye on, because generally speaking, Game Legion look pretty good. And I really like IM. And then for youngsters, Yimfat would be probably one that I throw out there. But yeah, essentially that would be the permutation. But with those 10, you can make a pretty decent little roster there. There was just a few names I was thinking about. But when they said we were going to go have a look in EU, they never mentioned that it had to be specifically, just the Danes and the French and whatever. So I had a little go
This is a great list.
a CIS version, because CIS has the deepest pool when it comes to talent, 100% of any region in the world. And I had a lot of fun looking through a CIS roster. So I want to start with the Orpa, and you are spoilt for choice. First one that came to mind was Shalfi from Forza. Had a pretty decent run in ECL and was like basically the most consistent.
He rifles
factor.
more, but he can AWP.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to go with Shalfi as someone who could play as an AWPer, essentially because in ECL he played a lot of AWPing. They would double AWP so often, basically. And my idea was basically I just go all firepower for a lot of this. So I kind of just bumped Shalfi onto the AWP because I didn't really fit. He didn't fit into any of the other rifle roles that I wanted, essentially. Then there's Deco as well, who has just been unbelievable for such a long time. Wrinkle from Bay, I would mention him earlier, but I think he's unbelievable. And Artfrost is another one. So those who don't know, he plays at Spirit Academy. And Spirit Academy have gone back 3 times in a row, I'm pretty sure now. We Play Academy finalists. And they only just won the most recent one, but the 2 previous they lost in the finals both times. Artfrost is the best player on that team. He is so good. So Artfrost is maybe one I throw out there because I think he's sick. And then we go to kind of like the more rifle support roles. Nickelback is one of the first things that comes to my mind. I fucking love Nickelback. I think he's super consistent, very, very talented. And He does his job and he does it well. Simple as that. There's a reason why Entropic did really well, and it was never Elian. It was your Crads and your Nickelbacks and your Foresters who carried that team to success. It wasn't even your Mears who came in. Mir would underperform pretty criminally on that side. It was those three as a core who set things up. So I went Nickelback and Forest. I didn't put Crad in for this one because Crad's he's already locked in now. He's now with Fours permanently. So Nickelback and Forest there. But for Forest, I also could change out for Head Trick from Navi Junior Academy. I think he had a 1.35 rating in the most recent We Play Academy League. And Navi Junior, generally speaking, didn't do that great, but he individually, unbelievable. I think he was the highest rated player, in fact, of the entire league, despite them not getting to the finals. So Head Trick would definitely go up there. Maybe I'd go for like if I had to pick, I'd probably go, if I go young, I'd go like Wrinkle, Head Trick, Nickelback, then IGL, Jerry. And then if I wanted to go on a more kind of a slightly different variation, I could either go very support heavy with Inters coming in, since he's now a free agent, or he's now going to be, or whatever, or Idis Balance. Idis Balance recently, rating-wise, has been unbelievable. Like, just the only good player on that squad. I think he's averaging like a 1.27 in the last 3 months. They've been losing more often than winning. And he can AWP and rifle. He's more than happy to be an AWPer, but he's also been an entry fragger. So he can literally do anything. So for me, Idis Balance was one that I threw out there. But essentially, anyone out of the likes of, a Shalfie Deco, Wrinkle, Artfrost, Nickelback, Forrester, Head Trick, Jerry, Idis Balance, Inters, and there's probably so many more. You can make a seriously scary roster there. One that will like comfortably get into the closed RMR. And potentially could even push further than that. And I'm talking like, deep runs in Challenger League, because some of the sides who make it pretty deep in Challenger League, like your Permitters, for example, they're not really that, nothing to kind of turn your nose up at. So, yeah, I had a bit of fun with it, but there's quite a few names there, basically. I quite like the
I don't disagree with any of them.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with any of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to kind of how deep our free agent pool is right now.
Yeah.
Like, we can make a lot of very, very good teams, and I think it's going to be very hard for TSM to mess up. So I am very interested to see what they actually settle on. And I'm really hoping that they don't drop the ball. And whoever they hired as a GM, because apparently he was like some guy local to Berlin or Germany or something like that, Central Europe. So overall, I think they're in the right place. Now, what they actually do is yet to be seen, but I'm sure we'll get an answer before the new year.
Yeah, local to Berlin. So we already know Slacks is locked in. Let's go. We're a
goodness.
roster. Ready for it.
Oh, wow.
So we got one more little thing before we call it a day. What we're looking forward to 2023. This is the kind of the wrap-up episode, the final episode of the year. What we're looking for in 2023, both career-wise, scene-wise, CSGO-wise. Who would set the floor?
I can start, I think.
Go for it, Paladin, because you've got, you deserve to start for once. So.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I mean, just career-wise, there are just so many events next year. Like, I think we're getting slowly back into like actual like CS circuit vibes now. I mean, even 2022, you could feel like January through April-ish, like there was still kind of a little bit of uncertainty in the air. And like once Cologne happened, like everything kind of just took off.
Yeah.
But this coming year, it's like we're gonna have a lot more lands. I'm hoping we get to experience those more like 1.5 tier events a lot more. Yep. Like your Lisa Masters and whatnot. And I think that we're kind of hitting that stride now. So that's what I'm kind of looking forward to most, like career-wise. Hopefully you get to work more of those. And then I think for the scene, I think Trav and I have a very similar one in the sense that can we finally settle on a storyline? Because I think we've been a very wishy-washy state of CS as of right now, where there isn't necessarily a number one team in the world. And I'm very curious to see whether we can actually settle on, I'm looking forward to Kato so much because it's like, is G2 actually legit? Can they run it back? Has FaZe fixed out their problems? Is the Heroic Outsiders thing really a flash in the pan? Like all of that kind of stuff. I think there's just so many different things that you could go with. But I'd like to settle on one storyline and try to run from there. But overall, 2023 is wide open in terms of my career personally and the scene as well. So very, very excited for what's to come.
What have you got, Trav?
Yep, I'm on board with that. That was the same sort of thing as I said. It's like, will there be another era or another mix and match year, right? Like, it was interesting that we had a conversation about this, I think, the other day, right, or something along the lines of that, where Launder said he preferred a big boy number one and then teams trying to overthrow that number one rather than different teams winning and there being no long era. It's hard to say how I feel about that because I actually didn't mind this year. it was mostly FaZe until you had, the occasional Cloud9, the occasional Navi, the occasional Heroic and G2 at the very end. So yeah, I think I think it's kind of 50-50 for me. But yeah, I think more when it comes to career, more experiences in studio is absolutely something I would love to have. Valencia was amazing, and just in general, more countries to visit because I've been to Sweden, I've been to Germany. I've never really been someone that traveled much before esports, honestly. I know, for example, my parents always worked really hard, so we never really went on holiday to any special places. We always just sort of stayed home and chilled. So for me, it's only Germany and Sweden at the moment. So if I can expand that just thanks to the scene that we're in and the career that I'm in, then that would be hugely fun. And I can't wait to meet more people across, of course, the Counter-Strike space. When it comes to scene, a Blast Major is just something that I think might just smash. We all said that IM Rio could smash things out of the park when it comes to viewership. It may have done okay, but didn't do great, unfortunately, due to the teams that were there in the end in the playoffs. But Blast Major, I'm just absolutely convinced that that everyone's going to be blown out of the park by what we're going to see for this. And I hope that Blast will live up to the billing because they've lived up to most billings that have been thrust in their face the last few years.
No, agreed. I think just in terms of CS wise, that was the first for me. It was Blast, in my opinion, are the best production wise. They're just unbelievable. Everything they do just looks stunning. Even down to the small increments, which a lot of people just sleep on. Like, I think their show match was so fun, so good. The 4 final show match was unbelievable. I didn't actually catch the one this time because it was on at fucking 7 a.m. But the one from 4 finals was so fun. Like, the kind of like, when you get smoked out, they got dry ice everywhere or no gravity on Anubis. It was like, that is what show matches should be. Not just like 2 teams sweating it out, or like back in the Sydney days when it was like, Henry G and Sponge. That's what show matches should be fun. It should be enjoyable and memes, not like just like a weird mixed match of professional players sweating it out kind of thing. So I think Blast, in my eyes, do it right, and they make it so like even when there's big names and pro players, they're still forced to be fun, like all the gimmicks they had. And I think with the integration of like the Blast TV thing, well, it's not something that I personally use. It seems like it's allowing for things to be more accessible and like
it's decent.
It's decent, yeah.
It's okay.
So I'm really excited for their major. I just think it's going to be unbelievable. And the fact it's Paris means I can take a train and go and see it. So I am most likely going to go just because it's so close. I'm just waiting to hear about whether it's in English or not. That's the only thing I'm waiting on.
Yeah, tickets and ticket prices as well. I'll wait to see how it goes.
Exactly. If it's
we'll
in
see
English,
how it goes. I'll tag on.
Yeah.
I'll tag along with you if it's good.
If it's English, I'm bound to take it on the day. No questions asked because I'm not going to fucking work it. So I may as well go and watch it. So, but I'm also, just on that note as well, quite excited to see who gets the second major of the year because there was the rumors that it was Blast versus Perfect World. Does that mean Perfect World then get a shoe in? Which would be very weird to see, but at the same time quite interesting. I like having just more TOs generally speaking, so it slightly dilutes the scene a bit and there's more variation. So that'd be quite interesting. Go into China or whatever. I remember being there. When was Beijing last? It was like 2017 or 2018?
I think they were 18 and it might be Shanghai. Is the last one that I can think of.
The only real things I've seen Perfect World do so far has been like really cool animations just for CS in general, like because they are basically like what runs CS in China because it needs to be censored, right? Because no skulls, no blood, stuff like that, right? So yeah, I think I've seen that, and I've seen scantily clad women with skin tattoos all over them, which was very interesting. Like at least like 4 or 5 years ago or something. That Perfect World did, but that'll be fascinating, and I can't wait to see which way that goes for sure.
Yeah, because I mean that I think quite interesting. Just a little bit. I mean, the Asian scene generally seems to get a bit stronger as well, and now they've got 8 slots as well for 8 teams competing at their RMR. So hey, I think generally speaking, the Asian scene, especially after covering it in Challenger League, it's getting stronger and stronger every single season. I've covered the last 4 seasons of it, so big fan. Career wise though, I don't know. I'm very excited about my career. I feel like this year's been a big positive. I think it's only been good things. You've
done the most out of all of us.
Yeah,
sure.
It's one of those things as well. Like I've worked fucking hard this year, so I've tried my hardest to set myself up for 2023 in terms of I was in full-time university and commentating, so I was I sacrificed a lot to make commentating work. Essentially, I'm glad it's paid off. And even think like the countries I've been to this year as well. I've been to Germany twice, been to Sweden twice, been to Denmark, France, Portugal, Qatar. So I've been about, right. So it makes me excited for what's going to happen in towards next year, because I'm now full time. Where this year I was only part time. And I've worked 2 ESL gigs in person with them. I've worked with Blast as well, because that was in Valorant. But I've worked with them and I've met the people over there as well, and I've seen what the production's like behind the scenes. It's unbelievable. Worked with some other providers as well, like WePlay and Elisa and whatever, and DreamHack with the Impact stuff as well. And I quite enjoy doing. I really enjoy actually doing the Impact stuff.
I'm proud of that.
It's been really refreshing. I've liked doing Impact, and I'm not going to announce anything, but I'm pretty sure I'll be involved in Impact next season from what I've seen so far. I was meant to be involved in season 2, but I couldn't with moving house and all the what. So season 3, I think I should be a little bit more involved, which should be quite exciting. But generally, yeah, it's been an exciting year. I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that I can get, I did 2 ESL gigs in person this year. I'm hoping I can match that, if not better, this year. Do 2, if not more. And with how many gigs there are on the scene, and I feel like I'm growing generally. I did all the playoffs for EU and Asia. I'm starting to climb. I'd like to get an online game for Pro League as well, like you did, Trav. I'd like to match you there, just because then I've completed everything. I've done every single tier of ESL system or ESEA system. So that'd be quite interesting. But basically, it's all up in the air, but I'm very excited. I've met and worked with Blast now, so there's a potential that I could do a bit of Blast stuff. Maybe, who knows? That'd be a massive, Hail Mary, but I'd love to do some Blast stuff with like their open or closed RMRs. I've worked with ESL. I want to do 2 or more. That'd be the goal.
Yeah. Companies, right? That's the cool thing. Because I think I looked at it back. What I do is I keep it on my Steam profile, not just Wikipedia. So I keep my Steam profile up to date as to what I've done this year, right? So we've got different organizations and tournament organizers. So Malta Vibes, that's Eden Esports. We've got Relog Media for their old Pinnacle Winter Series stuff. We've got Repub League, best production in online Counter-Strike, by the way. Unbelievable. Yeah. Love Repub League. And tier 2, absolutely. ESL, obviously. Elisa as well, which I did a day of the Kinguin Legends too. And then there's the European Development Championship as well. So like it's a CCT, of course, when it changed to that, which is now Grid. What I need in esports more than when it used to be. Relog Media. But yeah, I really like the variety. And if I can keep that relationship with the likes of ESL and Elisa, I'm happy. And as you say, Neo, I have not yet been in touch with Blast. I'm planning to drop an email. I think it's a good email. I hope they like me. Blast, take me. I love you.
Exactly. So I'm excited. I'm not going to get ahead of myself by any means, but I've worked fucking hard this year. I've tried to set myself up quite nicely for 2023. And now that I'm full time as well, I always was dedicated, but now this is my dedication. I've taken the risk. I've left the world of a secure job in finance for this. So we'll have to wait and see whether it works.
Can I just very quickly interrupt you, because we've got some breaking news, but not too breaking, but just still breaking news, because it actually relates to some stuff we mentioned in the podcast earlier on. Electronic has just formally requested that Liquipedia denote him with a neutral flag.
There we go. See, I knew it was fun. Electronic's not leaving. Electronic is Na'Vi.
I hope not.
So I can't.
Exactly.
I can't
2017, right? Since Flipside, he's been on that team. For him to leave from situations outside of his control would be a tragedy.
Exactly. Sure. He's synonymous. So, but yeah, career-wise, that's it. I'm just really excited. I'm hoping I can get. I've done, I think, maybe 7 or something like that in-person gigs this year across a couple of different games, FIFA and Valorant and CSGO. I'd love to push double digits. That'd be really awesome. This is full-time for me now, so not even just a financial sense, but it's so addictive when you work in person, because you just get a fire reignited every time underneath you. And I really liked it, whether it's on the desk or casting. And I feel like, me being a bit of a jack of all trades in that sense, I can do either. So I'm excited. Looking forward to it. I'm hoping this year goes well. But all you can do is hope, right? Because no one knows. No one's secure. No one's locked in. It's a fragile world commentating, but it's an exciting one. So who knows? Who knows? what I will say is from my early talks and whatever, I'm very excited about next year. And I think it's going to be good. I have no reason to feel concerned. Is how I put it. So
yeah,
so yeah.
I'm excited,
Exactly.
and I truly hope that we can all meet up at an event at some point next year
Exactly.
as well. 'Cause I
I'm
think
still
that's,
yet to meet you, Trav, in person.
I know. Well, I tell you what, after this podcast is over, I'll give you an opportunity to meet me at some point. So I've got a date that I want to share with you. So
Yes.
You'll see. You'll see. You'll see. But anyway, yeah, I just want to just finish off as well because we're nearing the end of the pod now. And just say, thank you to you, both of you guys too, for involving me in this. Because Neo, it was your idea to begin with, really, to start off this podcast.
Did I ever tell you the reason why?
Let's go for it. Tell us.
So the reason, this whole idea started at conference when I had this like fire lit under me, like fucking hell, this is such a cool life. I've been flown to Sweden to stand on a desk and analyze games, which I would just do to my mates in Discord, and they would just tell me to shut the fuck up when I do it anyway. So I was like, this is sick, and also you're getting paid for it as well. But I met Paladin. So at conference as well, Paladin was the only person even remotely close to my age in a way, like because obviously generally people already knew each other. I was the new boy. I knew Brandon because, funnily enough, for those who don't know, I worked with Brandon as an accountant before I started commentating. So we knew each other before the commentating world. And I didn't remember Brandon until in a Discord call when we was both commentators. It was like, by the way, did you work here? And it was like just like a weird, oh my God, I remember you. But so I knew Brandon. Brandon's a couple years older. I get on with Brandon quite well, but I don't speak to him all the time. I knew Yumi, similar thing. Work with him. Don't really speak to him all the time or regularly, but I get on with him really well. And Paladin, I didn't know. So actually, Paladin didn't follow me until we got to the event. Of everybody. Everybody else followed me. And I followed Paladin. And I fucking commented on one of his posts as well. Because Paladin just hit like a K subscribers. I was like, massively deserved, man. I really like your videos. Didn't follow me back. And I was like, this fucking prick. I was like, I'm going to hate this dude. I bet he's a prick. Get there. And
How did you follow me back immediately either?
Exactly.
When I followed him.
Who does this guy think he is? He's some big shit. But no, like but yeah, when I met Paladin there, we got on straight away. Basically, like as cringy as it sounds, like we clicked straight away, and the entire week we were there. We like me. It was just me and him. We would like go into Stockholm on our own. And, like we walk around this like sick park, and we would go out for food, and we would like go get a coffee in the morning, just us two basically, because we just got on really well. And it wasn't even a case of that we didn't like any. I liked everybody else at conference. It was just me and Paladin got on really well, and of course it's carried on since. But also, when I looked back at people I'd worked with over the space of 2021 and 2022, I remember meeting you, Trav, when we worked IM4, which I wasn't even booked onto. I got brought on last minute because Cody Cast got ill. And
there you go.
The reason mainly was I met you, got on with you really well, really enjoyed working with you, simple as that. But it's not like we really spoke outside of that after that gig anyway. But the reason why I wanted to bring you on, moreover, kind of people that I was maybe slightly close with at the time or anything, was because I thought of all the tier 2 or the majority of tier 2 casters, both of you had some of, if not the best work ethics. And I've always prided myself on work ethic. I always think I grind, I put in fucking a lot of effort. But I think a lot of tier 2 casters don't. I think they're really lazy and they really kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they don't do enough work. But they just think they just coast a lot. I never thought you two coasted, which is one of the primary reasons why I wanted to work with you on a podcast. I thought, well, when we do this podcast, it's not going to fall apart after 4 episodes, or we're not going to like leave it 2 months because we've all got good work ethic. Trav, I've always known you as the guy who will cast every fucking ESEA Advanced and Challenger League game under the sun on your own channel. That's how I first got introduced to you.
Distract myself from life. Just watch every single Counter-Strike game possible.
So it was like in a way, it was like, you know, I'd seen your work ethic, and Paladin had released some of the best videos I'd seen in the space anyway, and not many tier 2 people do YouTube or content regardless anyway. So that was the reason why I wanted to do a podcast with you two, because it was like, well, these two got as good a work ethic as I have, and they do good quality, and I get on with them. So it was the perfect trio. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Wink, wink. You never know. There might be more of me and Neo next year. There's a chance.
There's a chance.
I just will say that. There's a little bit of a chance. And I'm convinced that Paladin will be, after we did 2 events this year, I'm convinced that he'll be on a desk again soon, and I'll get a chance to meet him too. So really looking forward to it.
One.
Been a
Fingers
pleasure,
crossed,
guys.
boys.
Really
it's been a
appreciated
very-
it.
Yeah.
All the fun.
This podcast is the one that I look forward to every single time. We're like, okay, do you want to do a podcast episode? It's always the one that I am most looking forward to because it never feels like
A
effort,
job. Yeah.
ever. Yeah.
It just
And,
have a chat.
Every podcast that I've been a part of, there always feels like a little bit of effort needs to be put in as to like, I want to do this, and I have to do this, but never feels like that with this podcast. So thank you guys for an amazing year,
A good year.
of 2.5 Town, and here's to another couple more years with this.
Here's to 2023. I'll toast with my protein shaker. With the Christmas hat. There we go, lads. Well, that is us done and dusted, ladies and gentlemen, for 2022. This is our final episode. We'll be back in the latter stages of the player break. Early Jan, we'll be back with all the roster mania that is going to be happening and getting things started for IEM Katowice, baby. So we've got a lot of tournaments to talk about, but we'll leave them for a future time and all the rosters and whatnot. Anyway, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for joining us as per usual. Go and check out the boys' socials. All of ours are below. You can see them floating below the heads. It has been a good 2022 and many more episodes 2023. Thanks for now. We bid you all farewell. Thank you for joining us. Lots of love. Goodbye.